Welcome to Mystic Realms Recap. Please like, share, and subscribe. Enjoy today's episode.
Chen Ming's idea is very clear. But the problem is also obvious: how to get rid of this monster. What has been confirmed so far is that this monster stuck in the black hole is a psychic species with a substantial entity that can be touched. But it is not necessarily a living creature, and it does not necessarily have the life-sustaining organs of normal creatures. This means that Chen Ming is currently unclear about its fatal weakness. Moreover, a monster of this size cannot be broken by any means. Even if the weakness is known, it is not necessarily possible to use the weakness to kill it. Chen Ming has just tried the effect of ordinary weapons. It can only be said that ships below the level of the battleship should not even look at it. There is no point in giving it away for free, and there is even no point in being cannon fodder to attract firepower. In fact, the destroyer guard can be used as cannon fodder, especially when Chen Ming did not find that the monster has any long-range attack means other than launching gravity psychic beams from its mouth. Arranging more small boats in the fleet can help large ships attract some firepower. But environmental restrictions make this idea not so applicable. The huge gravity environment and the gravity psychic power that the monster possessed would make any spaceship that was not strong enough be wiped out in one encounter. There was no point for the small boat to participate in it. Even the most powerful stardust that Chen Ming was most used to using could not be considered as effective combat power. He could only use other spaceships to participate in the subsequent battles. And the most powerful Zerg that Chen Ming had on hand would also be limited by the conditions of the environment. Because the Zerg fleet had a large number of carrier-based aircraft, that is, Zerg flying units, their condition in the black hole horizon would obviously not be too good. Even if the Zerg itself had a higher physical strength and the Queen's psychic power guarantee, when it really got close to the black hole, its performance would at most be better than the Meteor fighter, which was designed for self-destruction. However, Chen Ming had another method that he had not tried yet, which was to use the phase space to fight the monster in the black hole. The power of the phase space was also very significant. He could launch another wave of attacks tentatively to see if the monster could effectively counter the power of the phase. But this can wait a little longer. It is not worthwhile to launch an attack just for one target. Chen Ming wants to find out not only whether the phase attack method is effective. He also wants to find out what kind of weapon can cause absolutely effective damage to it. At present, it seems that the means of stimulating high-energy particles to launch attacks, such as the tachyon spear, are very unclear. However, the actual effects of energy restraint bombs and high-energy lasers, which are also classified as energy weapons, have not been tested. In addition, there are also live ammunition-type weapons, chemical-type weapons, and explosive-type weapons that have not been tried. They have to be taken turns. It just so happens that this monster's attack method is very simple, and its body is restricted to the black hole and cannot move. It is simply the best target. He is not in a hurry. He will completely transform the Zerg battleship before the next experiment, reduce the number of small Zerg units carried, and install different types of weapons on different Zerg battleships. And because the Zerg battleship was modified from the mechanical family's mothership, the main weapons it carries are operating in the mode of the spine cannon. It is to rely on the increase of energy to produce the final powerful brick-flying effect. It is not too suitable for the Zerg warship, but it is convenient for Chen Ming to transform it at this time. Although using such a ship to fight the monster may cause some losses, it is more than the results that can be gained in the process. And the ship that has been pierced into the body of the monster for tens of thousands of years and has withstood the tearing of the gravity of the black hole for tens of thousands of years still maintains the overall structure intact. He can completely accept this loss. Wait, speaking of this ship, Chen Ming suddenly realized something. The ship pierced into the body of the monster, as if it only relied on the solidity of the hull. Although the solidity of this shining civilization ship is a little high, it also means that the monster may not be very resistant to sharp-pointed live ammunition weapons. Chen Ming knows a lot of this type of weapon, such as the very common storm needle or the live ammunition type ridge peak cannon head of the mechanical family. Even some shipborne spiked bullets made of Zerg keratin fired by Zerg warships can be considered as such weapons. And judging from the arthropod limb near the spaceship that has lost signs of activity, It is most likely the limb that was destroyed before the shining civilization spaceship pierced into it. So this monster must have weaknesses and can definitely be killed. He may be able to start directly from this spaceship and the dead limb. Through this spaceship, he can confirm how the shining civilization made the limb lose its vitality. Later, when he arranges the weapons of the Zerg battleship, he can also focus on this direction. It would be a good thing if he could kill the monster directly during the test. And Chen Ming felt that he could also change the plan slightly, no longer giving priority to solving the monster and then capturing the spaceship. Instead, he should first find a way to pull the ship out first, and then consider solving the problem of the monster itself. Of course, we still have to fight and do the necessary tests. Anyway, he is still not afraid of any losses as always, but he doesn't need to make some insignificant losses. So if there is a follow-up battle, Chen Ming plans to only send Zerg troops. Although the scavenger seems to be able to fight with the monster, Chen Ming still has the same idea as before and does not intend to send it to the battlefield. The value of what it has is far higher than the value of its participation in the battle. Moreover, the scavenger is not a psychic machine, and fighting this kind of battle with psychic power still depends on the Zerg, who also have psychic power. In fact, Chen Ming has a new idea. It is the idea of purely piling up the body to create new Zerg individuals. However, its feasibility, rationality, and the strength of the biological physiological structure of such a body cannot be solved in a short time. You can try it later. For now, just call the Zerg's main battleship Hercules A. And the scale of this exploratory battle is based on 100 main battleships. Chen Ming silently thought about the number of battleships that might make the Empire feel terrified. He does have so many battleships, and he can also make far more battleships than this number. This can only be said to be the power of the Zerg. When Chen Ming completely mastered the technology of battleships and the technology of making Zerg build battleships, no one could threaten him. No one could. After all, no one knows how many Zerg nests are desperately expanding in the endless universe. No one knows how many Zerg fleets are standing behind Chen Ming. Anyway, from the number of Zerg cruisers that appeared before, it can be known that there will definitely be no less. Chen Ming knew that the Empire seemed to have had several discussions about him, or more precisely, about him and ManhwaRecap. After all, there are many ways to deal with a powerful psychic empire, but if a powerful psychic has an endless fleet, the Empire has no effective way to counter it. For this situation, there is only one way to eradicate it early. The Empire either suppresses Chen Ming from the earliest time and does not give Chen Ming a chance to grow. Either assassinate Chen Ming before he grows up to the point where he cannot be solved, that is, before he masters the means of manufacturing the battleship. In fact, a long time ago, when Chen Ming was just taken away by Yu Hui, the Empire had such an arrangement. If Chen Ming stayed in the Empire, many things would definitely happen later. But there happened to be a major general who was not so well prepared. For some personal reasons, Chen Ming eventually left the Empire alive and spent his weakest and most dangerous period with Yu Hui. Let Chen Ming temporarily grow to the point where he could not be easily solved. Later, Chen Ming and Bai Quan started their cooperation. He had Bai Quan as a guarantor, and he stayed in the laboratory every day to do research. No one could contact him at all. Except for Zhui Jing's infiltration through brainwashing psychics, other means could not contact Chen Ming at all. Even if they contacted, it was not Chen Ming himself who stayed in the branch, but his prosthesis. In this way, Chen Ming knew more and more people, his ability became stronger and stronger, and it became more and more difficult to touch him. Gradually, Chen Ming finally no longer needed to rely on his body to survive, but on his consciousness to survive. When Chen Ming captured the mothership of the mechanical race, it was the last chance to kill him. As long as he could realize that Chen Ming and ManhwaRecap were one person, after killing all of Chen Ming's prostheses including ManhwaRecap, eliminating all the Zerg that could be traced, killing the Queen, and killing all the mechanical races controlled by Chen Ming would of course die. However, no one could seize this opportunity, and could only watch Chen Ming continue to grow. At present, the combat effectiveness of Chen Ming and ManhwaRecap, who are closely related to the Zerg nest, may even overthrow the imperial regime alone. The Empire has no chance to change this situation. These things were discovered by Chen Ming himself. It's just that he didn't say anything, and he was too lazy to let Whooping say anything. But it seems that there are smart people on the Empire's side who have thought of this link. Minister Lu Han of the Psychic Population Management Department, who had a conflict with Whooping before, seems to have resigned. By the way, Chen Ming also saw that the backward web page of the Psychic Census website was rebuilt and optimized into a comfortable interactive page. This is also a cause for celebration. It successfully alleviated the feeling of disgust that Chen Ming felt when he first used this web page. In short, the Empire had no objection to Chen Ming's affairs in the future. Chen Ming also continued to get along with the Empire in this strange way. As long as no one came to make trouble, as long as no one came to disgust him, he would not plan to change the status quo. He never thought that he was a genius who could do everything well. At most, he could do well in what he liked and was interested in. If he was really bored, he would do something like overthrowing the Empire, which was what the Emperor took turns to do. He didn't have the time to do it. Moreover, although the human empire was called the Empire, it was not an imperial system, but a more abstract democratic system. Because the Empire had a period of war in its early stages. At that time, there was a man who unified the war-torn earth and proclaimed himself emperor after the unification, and the unified country became the human empire. This perverse behavior was, of course, put to an end soon after. But because of this, civil war may break out again at any time. So just like how the Empire now transfers its conflicts to the outside world, a nominally democratic system that gathered military power was born. The ruling class's approach is to use the assembled military power to expand and transfer internal contradictions to external contradictions. This can also be regarded as one of the causes of the last pioneering era. And in the end, power is just a type of power. In this world where individuals transcend group power, power is really not an important thing, at least to Chen Ming. So Chen Ming didn't care what the empire was like or what political system it was. He only cares about himself and the people around him. Nothing else matters. Of course, his so-called can also include some things that are helpful to what he wants to do, such as rapidly developing technology and so on. Therefore, war is definitely not what he wants to see. Only internally stable peace and externally controllable war can enable a country to develop rapidly. Chen Ming patted his head and shook off these random thoughts that started to occur to him again. He would continue to explain his requirements to the insect queen and dispatch enough modified capital ships. However, due to the limitations of Chen Ming's current psychic state, he cannot directly use his psychic powers to assist in controlling the battleship. You can only use your own command skills to command the Zerg fleet, just like commanding the Empire's army. To put it simply, Chen Ming originally played a real-time strategy game when he controlled the Zerg fleet. When the battleships are temporarily unable to be controlled, the real-time strategy game becomes a simulated military sandbox. The difficulty is not on one level. But after all, Chen Ming also learned the Legion's college command skills from Bai Quan. Nor will he become blind when his own spiritual power cannot be used due to some limitations. He still has full fighting ability. In addition, Chen Ming has another idea. That's why he had to face trouble alone. It's not like he's the only one who has a brain and can think of solutions. Chen Ming turned around and returned to the research institute. He ran to the Legion, the laboratory he rented with the Legion. Of course, it is said to be a laboratory, but it is actually a colony on a satellite within a closed galaxy close to the home galaxy. After all, it involves phase beasts and capital ships, so of course a suitable experimental place is needed. And in this laboratory, Chen Ming also arranged for a place to be reserved for some important personnel currently involved in his battleship project. When he came back at this time, the director of the Psychic Research Institute and the director of the Ship Research Institute happened to be resting here. Both directors said hello to Chen Ming. Seeing that Chen Ming had returned to the Legion in person, the director of the Psychic Research Institute subconsciously asked, "Are you done with your work? Can you come back to work again?" "Not yet, but more." "What's wrong?" Chen Ming was very prepared and took 2 sensor videos of the 2 Big Macs he encountered inside and outside the wormhole on the table in the room. The scavenger robot and that monster in the black hole. The 2 directors, who were resting and leaning somewhat idly on the sofa, immediately sat upright. "What's this?" One is a giant robot left behind by the shining civilization, and the other is a suspected existence in the black hole dimension. The director of the Ship Research Institute asked casually, "Can't you beat me? Do you think I need to hit that iron guy?" "I know. That's why I'm talking about the thing in the black hole." Chen Ming explained, "I sent 2 ships to investigate, but they were all found there. I was about to find trouble with it again. However, cruiser-level battleships can no longer cause effective damage, so I am going to test what weapons are effective against it. Then kill it, so as not to affect my work. But I'm really not sure if the capital ship can hit it, so I came to ask the Empire if there are any good things they are researching that I can use." The 2 directors looked at each other, and the director of the Ship Research Institute turned to Chen Ming and said, "I'll go ask it for you." "Really? How should I say?" The expression on the director's face was a little awkward. Chen Ming said again, "Just say it. Type, it's just that before, the machine tribe destroyed its own planet in response to your Zerg invasion, right? The mothership destroys the land plate of the planet, destroys the core of the planet, and causes the planet to collapse. This method is quite efficient. Even the Empire seemed to only use its main weapons to cleanse the land before, right? Yeah, the Empire doesn't have any really useful weapons for destroying planets. So someone proposed to develop an efficient star-destroying weapon. Oh, now Chen Ming knew why the 2 directors looked a little embarrassed. Because the star-destroying weapons are essentially used against the Zerg. Then the 2 of them talked about the weapons against the Zerg in front of one of the controllers of the Zerg power, at least in the eyes of outsiders. It would be strange if they were not embarrassed. "Then you won't keep this kind of thing a secret from me?" "Because this weapon can be used against dimensional infection, it is impossible to keep it secret from you." Chen Ming did not care. No matter how many Colossus-class ships there were, they could not pose a real threat to his Zerg. His Zerg was not like dimensional infection, which had to develop slowly. "Are there any early concept drawings?" "Yes." The director of the Ship Research Institute took out the terminal and sent a concept drawing to Chen Ming. When Chen Ming saw the concept drawing for the first time, he couldn't help but say, "It's so big." Chen Ming, who had just seen the size of the scavenger and the black hole monster, couldn't help but say this. "The size of this thing can be imagined. It's quite big, and its tentative name is also Colossus. I know Colossus-class cargo ships. Colossus-class cargo ships are cruiser-class ships, and this Colossus-class is above the cruiser-class and main force class." "I know." Chen Ming said this casually and continued to look at the concept drawing. The Colossus class on this concept drawing does not have any redundant devices. Some of them have the heaviest ship armor, hull structure, most powerful shield, and most powerful engine that Chen Ming has ever seen. Combined with the Colossus-class weapon tentatively named Earth-Shattering Star, it has a strong deterrent power. But it is a type of ship specially used to destroy planets. It has no actual combat performance. It does not meet Chen Ming's needs. Even if such a Colossus is manufactured, there is a great possibility that it will be destroyed directly before approaching the monster in the black hole. It feels a bit inappropriate. Seeing Chen Ming's expression, he was a little disappointed. The director of the Ship Research Institute, who is extremely proficient in the advantages and disadvantages of the Colossus, immediately took out a blueprint that is more detailed than the concept map of the Colossus. In fact, there is another type of ship that is also in the production stage, the Titan class. This is a standard combat spacecraft, and it is currently planned to be used as the flagship of the main fleet. Because of what you said about the mechanical race, the Empire is already preparing ships for use in larger-scale wars. Although the material strength and other things are completely insufficient, I estimate that it will take more than 10 years to produce samples. But weapons of this level are already available now. Question mark. Chen Ming asked. The ship has not yet been landed. How come the weapons are already available? Because Titan-class weapons can be installed on the space station. The space station has enough volume and energy, just right for these weapons. From the Fanchao Research Institute. Yes, because the Empire has this demand now. Fanchao is moving quickly. You also know that the mechanical race is now fighting guerrilla warfare with us, making it possible for many of our space stations to be targeted. As long as we can install this kind of weapon and cooperate with the patrol team, There will be no problem in temporarily guarding it. Chen Ming has hardly paid attention to the mechanical race war in recent times, because the mechanical race war is no longer interesting in his opinion. He had basically taken all the benefits he was supposed to take away, and the only person worthy of his attention was Cheng Xinghai. There was no need to pay attention to this when he had nothing to do. The director also knew that Chen Ming was a busy man, not only with research in various aspects, but also with things outside. It was normal that he didn't know. He explained it to Chen Ming and took the initiative to say, "If you want to use it, I can help you transfer one now." "Okay, as soon as possible. This thing is also a good target. If I kill it by mistake, I may not have a chance to test it." "Okay." The director of the Ship Research Institute did not ask Chen Ming for any rent or guarantee. They did this more than once or twice. Anyway, Chen Ming will send the data back for everyone to study together. In the beginning, Chen Ming would take the initiative, and later, the process was simplified. This can be regarded as a tacit understanding between Chen Ming and the Empire. At this moment, the director of the Psychic Research Institute, who had been staring at the monster in the black hole for a long time, suddenly said, "I am very interested in this thing. Can I go and see it in person?" The director of the Psychic Research Institute was very curious about the monster in the black hole. But Chen Ming looked at his gray hair and agreed. "That place is too dangerous." The director of the Psychic Research Institute said stubbornly, "That's why I want to go over and take a look. So far, we have never encountered psychic creatures that require more than one main battleship to deal with. And I am a psychic after all. I have the ability to protect myself." Speaking of ability, Chen Ming really didn't know what kind of psychic the director of the Psychic Research Institute was. The director of the Psychic Research Institute usually focuses on the research of various psychic technologies and leads several teams to run several projects at the same time. It was not until Chen Ming's project started that he stopped other work and concentrated on Chen Ming's project. Although he didn't know the director's specific ability, Chen Ming really didn't see the director use any psychic power when doing the project. That means the director's psychic power is not the type that can assist research, and it is most likely a combat type. And from Chen Ming's usual perception, the director's psychic power strength is about level 4 or 5. Although this made the words of the psychic director somewhat convincing, Chen Ming was still a little hesitant, because the monster was in the horizon of the black hole. Although he would be more prepared next time he went there, he would not lack equipment to detect the horizon from outside. But if the psychic director went there, he might want to get close to the monster, and Chen Ming might not be able to guarantee his safety. Just looking at the psychic director's old eyes with a special desire and curiosity for the unknown, Chen Ming also found it difficult to say a direct refusal. "You can go, but you have to do what I say after you go, otherwise forget it." "No problem." The psychic director's moving eyes immediately returned to their normal appearance. He decisively agreed to Chen Ming's request. "After all, it is better to go than not to go. After we get there, I'll leave everything to you. Just let me see that monster. Are you coming?" The psychic director suddenly turned to the ship research director and asked this question, which made the ship director very annoyed and said, "If you want me to change the director, just say it directly. Have you finished talking? Let's go if you're done. Go get the weapons first." After the psychic director finished explaining some work, and the ship director explained the location of the Titan-class ship weapons sent by the Fanchao Research Institute, Chen Ming used psychic energy to take the two of them to a closed galaxy near the headquarters. This is the same area that Chen Ming rented to study the transformation of the Patriarch's corpse to make a main battleship. Both are places dedicated to some research that may cause large-scale physical damage. Chen Ming and the two directors were teleported directly to the port of the space station, with the ship director notifying them in advance. Their arrival did not cause any problems such as alarms. Arriving at his own territory, the ship director looked around and took Chen Ming to the area where the Titan-class ship weapons were installed. Before he took 2 steps, Chen Ming's eyes blurred. The light in the port suddenly began to flicker frequently. It seemed that there was a small malfunction in the lighting system. However, everyone else in the port pretended not to see anything and continued to do what they were supposed to do. The ship director explained, "It should be testing new weapons again. The weapons consume too much energy. It will definitely be fine after a while." "Really?" Just weapons can make a space station's energy supply insufficient, which makes Chen Ming look forward to it. But after a few seconds, the lighting system that was flashing wildly suddenly went out. The emergency lights came on after the normal lighting system went out, illuminating the port again. Is this normal? The director of the ship said calmly. It's normal. 2 new weapons were sent here for testing today. They are all newly developed Titan-class weapons, not the ones installed on the space station. He added, these weapons are all from Fan Chao. It's normal for their weapons to have such a large consumption, and they don't have much to put into actual combat, so they have reached a cooperation with us to use these weapons on the front line. The front line the director of the ship is talking about is obviously not the front line of the mechanical race war. Otherwise, why would it be sent to the headquarters? And he just said that the weapons sent by Fan Chao are new weapons. With the mechanical race already finished, the front line of the mechanical race has no ability to test at all. So it's obvious who the test object is. I have no objection, but I'm curious about what kind of weapon can cut off the power of such a space station specially used for testing. We will know soon. The director of the ship took Chen Ming and the director of the psychic power to an experimental area close to the outside of the space station. This is a common semi-open area for testing various weapons and devices that need to be tested in space. Standing on the ground of the space station, you can directly see the starry sky without any partitions, and this area uses a simulated gravity device to limit oxygen inside, so you can breathe without protective clothing. However, for safety reasons, all staff working here wear heavy protective clothing and are also equipped with noise-canceling headphones. Because you can see all kinds of large-scale machinery in operation everywhere in this area, your ears are filled with the roar of various mechanical operations anytime and anywhere. Without noise-canceling headphones, ears could retire decades earlier than humans. At this time, the emergency lights here were on just like the port outside, and everyone was running around in a hurry, obviously affected by the power outage. Chen Ming and his party did not stay at the entrance for long, and soon, led by the ship director, they reached the heights of this area. A command room with direct observation of the entire experimental site. The command room was also extremely busy. There was a middle-aged researcher in a white coat who was constantly giving various instructions. It is necessary to temporarily stop the testing process and wait until the space station circuit system returns to its original condition before testing. The ship director waited for a while until the emergency situation eased and the middle-aged researcher no longer needed to hold on to several walkie-talkies to give orders. He walked forward and asked, "How is the situation?" The middle-aged researcher who was in front of the podium immediately turned around and saw his boss, Chen Ming, and the psychic director next door. He quickly said, "Director Wang, Director Chen, and Director Gone. The space station has just been overloaded because it is equipped with 2 new Titan weapons at the same time. Only some less important lines need to be replaced. After uninstalling one door, the lines will be restored quickly and the problem will be solved immediately." The ship director nodded slightly and said, "That's just right. We will take away the unloaded door." "That's it, right?" As he spoke, he pointed to the 2 doors that could be seen outside the command room window and were installed side by side in the space. At this time, there was a giant weapon that was being disassembled and was thousands of meters long, comparable to an ordinary cruiser. Yes, those 2 are the newer models of Titan-class weapons that were just delivered, Purgatory Race. Chen Ming on the side has been focusing on the 2 giant weapons from the moment he arrived at the experimental area to the moment he entered the command room. When he heard the researcher mention their names, he immediately asked, "Is it related to the Purgatory Core?" "Yes." The psychic director who came with Chen Ming helped explain. These 2 Purgatory rays use light beams as aggregation carriers of entropy. When launched, they can converge all the energy that escapes, concentrate all the damage, and cause extraordinary damage. Powerful energy damage and heat damage. No wonder the energy consumed is so huge. It not only needs to emit a powerful energy beam, but also be able to stimulate the effect of the Purgatory Core. It's no wonder that it doesn't consume much. Chen Ming couldn't help but said, "What kind of ship can sustain such a huge energy consumption?" The ship director also explained, The Titan-class spacecraft is equipped with an antimatter reactor and an antimatter fuel engine of sufficient scale, coupled with energy crystallization technology, which can minimize the loss of energy circulating in the spacecraft. The calculation is theoretically possible on paper. We already have weapons. If we want to build ships later, we must build them on a scale that can afford these weapons. You don't have to worry about whether you can afford it or not. The key is whether it is useful. The number of purgatory cores is limited. So what Fanchao sent last time was a weakened version of this purgatory ray called Hellfire Ray. If there are enough purgatory rays, the Hellfire rays will mainly be installed on the space station. If it's not enough, the Hellfire ray will have to hit the Titan ship in the future. I remember we also have 2 Hellfire rays here. I'll go get one later. Chen Ming listened silently to the introduction of the ship director. Seeing that he seemed to have a good grasp of what he said, he asked, "Is there any difference?" The difference is that there is no purgatory core in the ion cannon. The thing in it that has a similar effect to the purgatory ray is made by imitating the purgatory core. Chen Ming was suddenly surprised. Counterfeiting? Have you started to be able to imitate? Yes, technological advancements are often unexpected. The normal number of purgatory cores cannot take care of all the space stations on the Empire's border. Imitation is the best solution. It's been almost a year since you published a technical article about purgatory core. After a year, there must be some movement, right? 2. Chen Ming didn't dwell too much on this matter. On the contrary, he was very happy to see it happen. Technological progress is definitely not a bad thing, at least not purely bad. At this time, someone suddenly pushed open the door of the control room and said, "The line review report has come out. The damaged lines have been replaced, and the circuit system can be restarted at any time." Hearing the familiar voice of the speaker, Chen Ming immediately looked back. Sure enough, it was He Gu whom he had not seen for some time. Chen Ming immediately stepped forward to say hello and asked, "Are you working on this project now?" "No, I'm still working on the previous project, but now I'm here to communicate. The research progress is not going well." "Yes." He Gu admitted this point generously. The main reason is that there are only a few people working on this project of civilianization of psychic devices, and there is no precedent to refer to. It just so happened that I heard that the Fanchao Research Institute was preparing to militarize and mass-produce psychic devices and send a few more weapons over, so I applied for academic exchanges. I feel like we can start with this. After all, many civilian devices are derived from military devices. Very good. I wish you success. After delivering the documents, He Gu turned around and left quickly. The middle-aged researcher in charge of commanding this experimental site also quickly told Chen Ming that the purgatory ray had been unloaded and could be taken away at any time. Another Hellfire ray had also been unloaded, just on the other side of the space station, and could also be taken away. Chen Ming, of course, went there without hesitation and took control of the 2 new weapons. Before leaving here, he asked the ship director if there were any other weapons that needed to be tested. So he added a pair of miscellaneous things to the list of weapons he took away with his psychic power. Among them, there were 2 weapons that Chen Ming found more interesting, one of which was the arc launcher carried by the cruiser. The other is a modular weapon similar to that of the mechanical family carried by the main battleship, the focused arc launcher. That is, the enhanced version of the arc launcher. It is said that it can theoretically directly penetrate the target's shield and hull, causing arc damage directly acting on the hull structure. However, it is said that the effects of these weapons in the previous experiments seem to be somewhat unsatisfactory. The team that developed this weapon seems to have given up. But Chen Ming still paid special attention to it, because he thinks these 2 things seem to have some potential. After everything was ready, Chen Ming took the director of the psychic power to jump again and arrived at his highest point. At this time, only 2 hours had passed since he entered the wormhole and left from the other end of the wormhole to encounter the monster in the black hole. His highest point was still in place, observing the situation of the black hole from a distance. After confirming that he had arrived at the place, the director of the psychic power immediately determined his coordinates, and his confirmation method was also very simple and effective. "Where is this place?" "I don't know yet." Chen Ming knocked on the control console of the spaceship in front of him. signaling the director of the psychic energy to come and take a look. Do you see that wormhole? That's where I came out. As soon as I came out, I was attacked by the thing in the black hole. So I planned to kill that thing first to confirm the safety of the surrounding area and then confirm the specific location. However, all the observable galaxies nearby have been recorded, and it is confirmed that there is no familiar galaxy structure. I can be sure that we are still in our universe, but we are also outside our universe. That is, outside the observable universe. The director of the psychic energy helped Chen Ming fill in the last self-evident sentence in his heart, and he roughly understood why Chen Ming had to deal with the monster first. After all, the entrance and exit of this place need to pass through the wormhole. Although Chen Ming can use psychic energy to move directly, it is definitely more stable to use natural wormholes to move. Chen Ming did not chat with the director of the psychic energy for much. Under the effect of his psychic energy, all the weapons that were previously sent to the colony at the other end of the wormhole appeared near his spaceship. Like a floating gun, it was suspended in the surroundings, facing the direction of the black hole. Because the types of weapons obtained from the Empire were too complicated, it was too troublesome to install them one by one on the Zerg spacecraft. So Chen Ming planned to use these weapons directly. Only the other types of weapons that he wanted to test before were tested by modifying the Zerg warships. However, Chen Ming always remembered the purpose of his coming this time. The main purpose was to seize the spacecraft of the Shining Civilization, and testing weapons was secondary. After all, as long as the technology of the Shining Civilization spacecraft was available, a better design than the existing spacecraft would no longer be a problem. After all the suspended weapons were charged out of thin air, with the effect of Chen Ming's psychic power again, hundreds of Zerg battleships also appeared in the galaxy together. The director of the psychic power beside Chen Ming looked at such a large fleet with some amazement, and couldn't help but sigh at Chen Ming's current strength. In his understanding, even the empire that had reached its peak in the pioneering era seemed to have never had a main fleet of this scale. However, the fact that Chen Ming has such a fleet is already known to many people, but he has seen it with his own eyes now. There is nothing to say. Chen Ming has such power and is willing to get along with the empire normally, which is a very good situation for the empire. If he doesn't give face, it will be a pure brainless behavior. Moreover, Chen Ming gathered so many battleships together at this time to face a more terrible enemy. After the Zerg fleet arrived, Chen Ming activated the updated reconnaissance device, which can directly observe the situation inside the black hole's event horizon outside the black hole's event horizon. The new sensor screen immediately appeared on the spacecraft console. I saw that the monster was still struggling at the mouth of the black hole, trying to break free from the black hole's shackles, and the limbs waving wildly seemed to vent its emotions. But it can only vent. It can't break free from the shackles of the black hole at all. The psychic detection device has recorded the psychic fluctuations it emits when using psychic energy. All the data are available. You can check them out yourself. Chen Ming said a few words to the director of the Psychic Energy Institute, and then used psychic energy to control various reconnaissance devices to spread out around the black hole to record the actual combat data of various weapons in the future. The main fleet of the Zerg also began to approach slowly, and various weapons for testing that Chen Ming had modified himself were ready to go. However, those weapons that were purely suspended in the universe entered the horizon close to the black hole at a faster speed. The monster in the black hole seemed to have discovered the approaching weapons very early because Chen Ming had harassed it before. The big mouth on its head split open to 180 degrees again, and the dark purple light ball appeared in its mouth again. In a blink of an eye, a gravity beam swept towards the approaching group of weapons. However, as long as the monster's beam still needs to rely on its own head rotation to locate, it will not be able to hit these weapons with Chen Ming's psychic energy as a report. All weapons controlled by Chen Ming successfully entered the black hole's horizon, and after entering their respective ranges, they opened fire directly. Energy, live ammunition, chemical, explosion, all types of weapons are tilting ammunition and energy towards the monster. Although the accuracy of all weapons in the black hole's horizon will be affected. However, the monster itself exists on the black hole and is connected to the black hole. all things affected by the black hole's gravity will get a certain degree of accuracy correction. This results in some weapons that may have failed to hit due to accuracy errors to hit the monster more accurately. After the first wave of bombardment, the explosions or flames caused by the impact of various weapons had not had time to completely dissipate, and the Zerg's main fleet followed closely and stepped into the black hole's horizon area, launched a second wave of more terrifying firepower. But in a colorful fire, a beam of deep purple light suddenly shot out. All Zerg battleships on this deep purple beam immediately made a short-distance jump, but 2 Zerg battleships were still hit, even though the 2 battleships directly cut off the part of the tissue that was hit. But the gravity's psychic fluctuations continued to entangle the battleships like a thorn in the flesh, as if they would not stop until the entire battleship was crushed into a bloody ball. After discovering this situation, the 2 Zerg warships did not hesitate for a moment and started the jump engine again, jumping to the part of the body that was extremely close to the monster and the black hole. The monster seemed to have sensed the jump fluctuations approaching it in advance. At the moment when the jump of the 2 battleships ended, it suddenly pulled its terrifying arthropod limbs towards them. The Zerg carapace, which was extremely solid in Chen Ming's cognition, was shattered, and the 2 battleships broke near the black hole. Then they were swallowed by the monster. Only some debris fragments were floating outside. Chen Ming was quite satisfied with the result. At the same time, he took a quick look at the data that had been obtained. It was just as he had guessed before. Most weapons will be affected by a strong gravity field when approaching the monster and cannot play their full role. This means that although the colorful smoke and dust just now looked powerful, the damage caused was not ideal. On the contrary, in the second wave of attacks, the sharp live ammunition weapons carried by Chen Ming's Zerg battleships had a very good effect on it. Almost all of them penetrated its skin that seemed to have the characteristics of maggots and leeches. However, when facing a creature of this size, it is really hard to see the specific damage caused by live ammunition. And looking at the movements of the monster, it seems that it has not caused enough damage, let alone any fatal injuries. However, there are 2 weapons that are exceptions. One is the Titan-class shipborne weapon Purgatory Ray, and the other is the seemingly unpopular concentrated arc launcher. The Purgatory Ray left a huge burning mark on the monster's body, and the limbs growing near the burning mark twitched faster than the limbs in other places. Obviously, the Purgatory Ray really hurt it. The situation of the concentrated arc launcher is quite special. Although the arcs that hit the monster's body directly the first few times were not ideal, the arc that hit the monster's limbs directly penetrated the limbs and successfully broke them. The broken limb was now slowly falling into the black hole. Chen Ming watched the broken limbs pierced by the arc falling into the black hole. He decisively ordered the Zerg fleet to take action and immediately released several Hercules-class ships in good condition to perform a short-distance jump. They jumped to the broken limbs close to the black hole monster and tried to capture the broken limbs. But the black hole monster would not just watch. When Chen Ming's Hercules ended this short-distance jump, several limbs with the momentum of destroying everything were already waving at them. Fortunately, there was previous experience. Chen Ming also knew that the black hole monster had the ability to detect jump fluctuations. So when he gave the order, he also gave the order for the Zerg fleet to keep moving and be ready to maneuver at any time when the jump ended. But even so, 2 Hercules-class ships were still hit by the limbs of the black hole monster and instantly shattered in the black hole horizon. It's not that the Zerg consciousness on Hercules didn't react in time, but that the broken limb had an unexpected huge gravity. As a result, if Hercules evaded in the direction away from the broken limb instead of approaching it, he would be pulled by the unexpected gravity. Fortunately, the gravity of the limb can be traced, and the real trouble lies in the gravity released by the black hole monster itself. This can only rely on Chen Ming to detect the location, direction, and intensity of the monster's psychic energy fluctuations to judge the actual effect of this gravity. In this process, all approaching Zerg warships must dodge in order to get closer to the broken limb that is getting closer and closer to the black hole. The black hole monster does not seem to have the idea of swallowing its own limbs directly like it swallowed the Zerg warships before. It seems that it just wants the broken limb to fall into the black hole or wants to use the broken limb to attract more Zerg warships to it, so that it can launch an attack. The situation can only be said to be very dangerous. Any accident may cause serious losses. But for Chen Ming, these losses were just like that. He continued to send more than 20 Hercules-class ships to approach and tried to touch the stump against those frantically waving arthropods. The loss of the Hercules in the middle of the journey made the psychic minister next to him feel distressed. But Chen Ming sent them all over without blinking, just to achieve his goal. In the end, the stump that was broken by the arc launcher was still caught by the tentacles extending from a Hercules-class ship and retreated to the rear of the Zerg fleet after a short jump, escaping the crisis of being dragged into the black hole or swallowed by the black hole monster. While the monster was still in a state of impotence and rage, fighting with the remaining Zerg fleet in the Hudong vision, Chen Ming quickly checked the damaged part of the stump. The inside was all black matter, and it was impossible to tell what kind of nature it had. However, judging from the shape of the wound section, it was a break caused by the breakdown of the concentrated arc. Chen Ming immediately repeated the inspection several times and confirmed that this was the case. It was a pure arc penetration. There was no collateral damage from other weapons, and there was no old injury or anything like that. This made him a little confused. If the power of the arc launcher was really so strong, why would the huge part that hit the monster's body seem to have no damage? This seemed interesting. Chen Ming was not in a hurry to figure out the cause of the problem immediately. He could investigate it in detail later. Now, let him concentrate on solving the current problem. Chen Ming planned to take the broken limb away first and send it to other places for subsequent research. But just when the Prometheus that captured the broken limb left the black hole's event horizon and was about to jump away, the outer layer of the broken limb it captured, the skin that seemed to be a fusion of cortex and keratin, suddenly dried up quickly, and countless cracks appeared on the surface. Some dark substances were spreading out from the cracks. Before these spreading black substances had time to spread around, the gravity of the limbs sucked all of them back. The limb suddenly curled up, and its size was inexplicably getting smaller, but its gravity was increasing in the opposite direction. For a moment, Chen Ming seemed to see that the starry sky around the broken limbs seemed to be distorted. That was a sign that light was bent by gravity. After leaving the black hole's event horizon, the broken limbs seemed to be about to collapse into a black hole. It seems that the black matter in the limbs is closely related to the matter that constitutes the black hole and connects the black hole dimension. The Minister of Psychic Energy also saw this situation at the moment, and he was so shocked that he stood up directly from the main console. However, Chen Ming waved his hand slightly to signal him to sit down. Even if this limb was transformed into a black hole, it would not be enough to threaten him. Moreover, judging from the mass of the limb observed so far, even if the blessing of psychic energy is taken into account, the black hole it eventually produces may be completely invisible to the naked eye. But it was a black hole after all, and two black holes so close to each other. So Chen Ming thought about it, activated his psychic power, and used the dimensional power he controlled to block the limb that was collapsing into a black hole. In his opinion, there is a high probability that there is a real black hole dimension behind the black hole, and the act of creating a black hole is to use the dimensional power to open the way to the black hole dimension. Therefore, using dimensional power to compete with the force that created the black hole is the most likely way he thought of to be effective. Anyway, if it doesn't work, he has other means. And the reality is indeed what he thought. The moment when the dimensional power belonging to Chen Ming blocked this limb, the process of the limb collapsing into a black hole was immediately stopped, and the turbulent black matter gradually subsided, retracted back inside the limb, and returned to its original appearance. Quietly captured by the tentacles of the Zerg warship, the psychic minister didn't understand the development of the matter and asked, "That was just now?" Chen Ming explained. The monster's limbs seemed to have started to transform into a black hole after leaving the black hole's horizon, so I used some tricks to lock it up. The effect was okay, and it shouldn't change anymore. The power to block black holes? It seems there's more to it than that. Chen Ming has the power to seal off a limb, and this limb can obviously be taken away anywhere. This is tantamount to Chen Ming mastering part of the means to utilize the power of black holes. Even if it is just the most simple and crude destructive power, it is mastered. The psychic director nodded silently, then immediately lowered his head and looked at the console. This was used to cover up his somewhat unbearable shocked expression. Just when he lowered his head, he happened to see the scene where all the Zerg warships that were still in the black hole suddenly disappeared. That's why all of Chen Ming's Zerg warships activated their biomass phase coils at the same time and entered the phase space. Of course, the Zerg warships do not use the orthodox phase coils installed on various phase ships, but the organs that have the same function as the phase coils evolved by the Zerg Queen after devouring the genes of the phase beasts. Most of what should be tested under normal cosmic environment has been tested. It's time to test out some new stuff. Of course, Chen Ming will not look at the air in the normal universe, and will also enter the phase space. The psychic minister's eyes swept over the console, and suddenly he couldn't sit still anymore, and said, "This black hole." "I noticed." Chen Ming responded, his eyes also locked on the console. Because when observing the black hole where the monster exists in the phase space, you can find that the existence of this black hole has lost the terrifying feeling of approaching an abyss that it brings to people in the normal universe. It becomes like an ordinary celestial body. Of course it should be so. Phase space is an independent dimension that means there is self-awareness. When there is a gap in the phase space leading to the scarlet dimension and the normal universe, it will actively let the phase beast seal it. So as a celestial body like a black hole that objectively exists in the universe, since it serves as a passage to the black hole dimension in the normal universe, it is normal for its passage to be closed in the phase space. It's normal to lose that special look and feel. After all, this is a world with spiritual beings. No matter what happened to the things that Chen Ming originally understood, he would quickly accept it happily. And as he discovered this situation, he suddenly had an idea. Chen Ming directly invoked his spiritual energy and sent the limb of the black hole monster that he had locked into the phase space, which was being dragged to a safe place by the Zerg warship to prepare for the jump. And it directly unlocked the original lock on it. As he expected, this limb did not collapse towards the black hole again, but instead floated in the phase space like a real biological limb. It is as expected. Since the passage to the black hole dimension in the phase space is blocked, Chen Ming has reason to believe that there is a high probability that the process of transforming the black hole will also be blocked. So he did it. After all, it is impossible for him to keep controlling this limb like this. Sooner or later, he will need to unblock it and start studying the limb. Rather than thinking about solutions later, give it a try when the right opportunity presents itself. He tried and succeeded. The limbs sent into the phase space can indeed be suppressed by the power of the phase space. Chen Ming no longer needs to be distracted, and subsequent research can also be conducted in the phase space together. Of course, the psychic minister who was beside Chen Ming at the highest point in the phase space also saw what was happening outside through the spacecraft sensors. He immediately understood the situation and said nothing more. He also wanted to see more of the monster in the phase space and see how Chen Ming would deal with it. Although he has always believed that the Fanchao Research Institute is at the forefront of understanding the unknown, and their Psychic Research Institute is at the forefront. But compared to now, when he personally followed Chen Ming to this place outside the observable universe, he knew what the real situation was. The Zerg fleet regrouped at the edge of the black hole's event horizon in phase space. However, the black hole monster could not detect this. It even thought that all the Zerg fleets had disappeared and left. After showing some incompetent rage that it could leave at will but unable to move in the face of the enemy, it continued its meaningless struggle at the entrance of the black hole. Chen Ming's fleet quietly approached the center of the black hole and lurked behind the monster. The formations were slightly dispersed, and all available weapons were aimed at the parts of the black hole monster's body where the limbs were most densely distributed. That is the position of the upper half of the trunk close to its head that Chen Ming judged. The dark monster in the normal universe seemed to move its messy limbs uneasily. Next moment, the firepower erupting from a dimension it didn't understand at all instantly covered its body and severely damaged its body in the blink of an eye. A huge amount of black hole material ejected from the wound that almost penetrated half of the black hole monster. The terrifying, Twisted and chaotic gravity is accompanied by these randomly shaped black hole materials that fill the entire black hole horizon. However, Chen Ming's Zerg fleet was not affected at all. The effect of phase space's suppression of normal dimensions cannot be understood from the perspective of existence in the black hole dimension, which can be said to be completely isolated from the normal universe. The attack by Chen Ming's Zerg fleet continued, and the wounds continued to expand. The black hole monster twisted its body with difficulty and opened its crack in the direction of the source of the attack. Just when Chen Ming thought it was about to release the psychic gravity beam, its big mouth suddenly slammed into the purple ball of light in the crack. When it opened its huge mouth again in the next moment, a violent ring-shaped gravity field suddenly spread out. It was like howling out heavy sound waves visible to the naked eye, sweeping across the entire black hole horizon, and even affecting a large area outside the black hole horizon. There is actually such a method. If Chen Ming had just relied on the number of fleets to push in as soon as he came up, no matter how many spaceships came, they would all be wiped out in this attack. Fortunately, Chen Ming was prepared and chose to test the monster repeatedly and actually launched the attack in phase space. Therefore, his Zerg fleet remained unaffected. He even felt that he might be able to take this opportunity to kill the monster directly. The province has long nights and many dreams. So Chen Ming stopped the ceasefire for a moment, preparing to focus on the wound being repaired. But at the moment when the second wave of firepower from the Zerg fleet slanted out, the first laser beam attack hit. A sense of danger suddenly surged into the perception of the robots Chen Ming left on each Zerg warship. The black hole monster was seen biting its head, which had suffered countless injuries, towards the position of the Zerg fleet in the phase space. It didn't bite into an empty space, but seemed to really bite into something substantial. In the normal universe at this time, the investigation equipment left by Chen Ming discovered that part of the front part of the monster's head was missing. It wasn't that its head was shattered by the surging firepower. Instead, its head has penetrated into the phase space, and part of it is in the phase space. It opened its huge mouth again at the Zerg fleet. The psychic director really couldn't sit still this time, and a fierce psychic wave circulated in his body. He couldn't understand what the black hole monster was doing, but he knew they were in trouble. Chen Ming understood what this monster had done. It's easy to say. First of all, phase space suppresses the normal universe. Things that only exist in phase space can actively contact things in phase space, but things in the normal universe cannot do this in reverse. Even dead objects are the same. As long as they only exist in phase space, they are pure suppression of things in the normal universe. But the monster took a chance. Chen Ming took the initiative to attack it, but he had to let the attack method come into contact with it, so that the chance of dimension suppression was almost non-existent at this moment. The black hole monster itself has the ability to pass through the black hole dimension and come to the normal universe. Although it is stuck here now, it naturally controls part of the power of the dimension. So that's when phase space takes a toll on it existing in the normal universe. It uses the moment when things in the phase space come into contact with things in the normal universe to tear apart the space where the brief contact occurred. Just like what the destruction core once did, it opened a rift between the normal universe and phase space and penetrated into phase space. The deep purple beam of light swept directly from the gap in the dimension to the Zerg fleet. Although Chen Ming cannot directly use spiritual energy to control these Zerg warships for the time being, the consciousness link between him and the Zerg Queen can still share the situation as quickly as possible. This gave the Zerg warships some time to counterattack. Although 7 Hercules-class ships were still hit by the psychic gravity beam, the sudden damage had been minimized. However, the situation has not yet eased. Chen Ming didn't expect the space to be torn apart. Moreover, in his consciousness space, the power originating from the phase space seemed to be calling him, asking him to repair the crack that had just been torn apart. Chen Ming does have the ability to repair. The gap between the phase space and the normal universe is easy to repair. After all, the phase space does not invade, so just repair it casually. But the black hole monster is standing on the crack at this time and is trying to expand the crack, trying to penetrate into the phase space. The danger of this thing is still very scary. And why did Chen Ming feel that the phase space regarded him as a phase monster? But he did get the benefit of the phase space anyway, so it was okay to help maintain the phase space. Not to mention that his fleet was still using the special characteristics of the phase space to unilaterally suppress the monster. If the monster was allowed to enter the phase space, it would be in big trouble if it escaped from the black hole. No matter what, we must try our best to prevent this from happening. Chen Ming first comforted the psychic master, who seemed to have physical mutation-type psychic energy, and asked him not to rush to do it. Then, Chen Ming's Zerg fleet suddenly rushed to the gap one after another. Even at the risk of being balled up by gravity's psychic energy, it still crashed directly into it with its remaining momentum. A giant ball of pure white light completely covered the body of the black hole monster. In fact, it was not a ball of light. Instead, the Hercules class converted all the nutrients of all the tissues and organs into pure energy crystals. And Chen Ming's psychic energy also transported a bunch of stored energy crystals, which were activated when they were about to hit, and triggered when they hit. The devastating impact dealt a heavy blow to the black hole monster. And there are more than 70 Zerg battleships of this scale that can be used for self-destruction. One after another, light balls appeared on the body of the black hole monster, and the powerful impact repelled the part of its body that had penetrated into the phase space. Chen Ming's psychic energy immediately followed up, using the matter that the phase space itself had, that is, the ubiquitous medium, to repair the phase cracks torn by the black hole monster. The black hole monster certainly would not be willing to be repelled like this. It opened its bloody mouth again, trying to tear the cracks between dimensions again. But several Zerg battleships left the phase space, carrying a belly full of energy crystals, and self-destructed face to face with it. It was just such a short moment of obstruction that allowed Chen Ming to successfully repair the cracks completely. Without the contact between dimensions, dimensional suppression takes effect again. The black hole monster can only bite randomly in the void like a mad dog, and there is no way to directly tear the space barrier. Chen Ming also took this opportunity to gather his troops and stay away from the black hole area. He is not in a hurry to continue the attack for the time being. At least he is not going to attack before thinking of a way to stop the black hole monster from tearing the space. Otherwise, if it is torn open again, who knows what this monster will do later, and whether it will have any troublesome means. And he has collected enough data, whether it is the black hole monster or the weapon. He has to go back and process this data first. What's more, the purpose of his trip is always to obtain the spaceship of the shining civilization that pierced into its body. And when the monster smashed the Zerg warship he let go, his main purpose has been achieved. The Zerg matter has drifted over and can be used as an anchor point in space, allowing Chen Ming to send the Afterglow core over and completely control the spaceship. And just when Chen Ming ordered the retreat, Chen Ming's psychic power also acted on the shining civilization spaceship that pierced the body of the black hole monster, bringing it into the body of the black hole monster and to his highest point. And he also knew the name of this spaceship at this time. Shining Wormhole Reconnaissance Frigate. This is just a frigate, but it has a hull, structure, and armor that are unmatched by any human spaceship, even a capital ship, or even a theoretical capital ship design. It may be just an ordinary spaceship in the shining civilization, but everything used on it is the crystallization of the shining civilization technology. Looking at this ship left behind by the shining civilization, Chen Ming had a hard time resisting the idea of sending all the equipment to the spot and starting to analyze the ship. He turned to observe the overall condition of the ship. The external structure of the ship does not seem to have any problems at present. Even though the fuel of the ship has been exhausted, all the systems that require energy to operate have already completely stopped working, and the ship has been almost face-to-face with the core of the black hole for tens of thousands of years. The ship still has no structural damage and remains intact. The interior of the ship also looks completely fine. The hull is very clean, and there is nothing that can be called debris arranged inside the ship. In addition to the first impression of cleanliness, this ship gives Chen Ming the feeling of a very complete and compact integrated structure, without any scattered things. Combined with the design of the ship's operating system and internal layout, it can be seen that this ship can be driven by one person and no more than 2 people at most. Therefore, there is nothing left by the former driver on the ship. Although the technology of the shining civilization is indeed very strong, it is not to the extent that daily necessities or some supplies can exist for tens of thousands of years. After so much time, even inside the spaceship, the things that should be gone should have been gone long ago. This just made Chen Ming unable to confirm the specific image of the main species of the shining civilization, nor could he use this to figure out the specific situation of the shining civilization. However, just looking at the design of the interior of the spaceship, we can still see some of the more common culture of the shining civilization. For example, some insect-style markings are like some kind of decorations that have been integrated into the daily life of the shining civilization. This can be seen from the appearance design of the ground mechanical units. However, Chen Ming doesn't care about culture. Every civilization has its own culture. He is more concerned about the technology of the shining civilization, especially whether there are any other relics on this spaceship besides the spaceship. Of course there are things, and it is something that Chen Ming is interested in. In a spaceship room at the back of this shining civilization spaceship, which is probably a warehouse, there is a thing that should be considered a power armor. There are also some supporting weapons or weapons for individual soldiers placed inside this small warehouse. It seems that even if you are not a shining civilization person, but an imperial, you can easily get started with these things after getting familiar with them. Chen Ming had studied the text of the shining civilization in the past 6 months, and of course he knew that in the current mainstream view, the main species of the shining civilization was most likely humanoid. Therefore, it was not surprising that there were these things on the spacecraft. He was even more curious whether there were other types of things on the spacecraft that he was interested in. With this idea in mind, Chen Ming opened the power armor produced by the shining civilization. Unfortunately, there were no corpses inside the power armor, and there was no sign of it having been used. It seemed that the spacecraft was directly attacked by the black hole monster after passing through the wormhole, and the driver died before he could put on the power armor to protect himself. As for the corpse, it was most likely that it had been torn apart by the gravity of the black hole after the fuel of the spacecraft was exhausted and the ability to protect the internal structure and objects was lost, and finally rotted in the spacecraft and could no longer be found. Chen Ming had no way to confirm what the main species of the shining civilization was through the corpse, nor could he revive a person of the shining civilization through the resurrection mechanical fluid to understand their past. This was bad news with no solution. But at least the power armor was real, and those weapons were advanced weapons that actually existed. Whether it is the shining power armor or the shining civilization's individual weapons, their technical levels obviously exceed the relevant technical levels currently mastered by the Empire. Chen Ming can integrate these technologies into his own biological armor technology, or use them in exchange for some resources he needs in the Empire. In addition to physical objects such as power armor and weapons, Chen Ming also found the storage unit that stores important information about the spacecraft in the log of the spacecraft's computer. He can see from the information in the storage unit that this is a spacecraft that was directly dispatched to perform tasks right after leaving the factory. And he can also see some basic data of the spacecraft, including the place of origin, developer, designer, etc. From these contents, it can be seen that the social structure of the shining civilization is similar to that of humans. And he also found a simple description of the last mission performed by this spacecraft in the database of the spacecraft's computer, including the departure point, destination, and mission content. The destination is of course here, and the mission purpose is also clear, even written on the name of this spacecraft. And the departure point is in the observable universe area of the Empire that Chen Ming has not been to. That location is some distance away from the wormhole of the origin galaxy, but not too far away. There is a high possibility that there are relics of the shining civilization, or even military relics. Of course, it is not ruled out that exploring wormholes is a common project, and there is only an ordinary relic there. It is even possible that there is nothing left at the departure point. But anyway, Chen Ming wrote down this location and immediately began to arrange for the spacecraft to go there to take a look. There should be a result soon. In addition, when Chen Ming was checking the mission log, in addition to the information about the mission itself, he also saw another potentially valuable information. That is the date of execution of this mission. This is very important news, and this time point means a lot of things. But here he encountered a problem. The date of execution of the mission uses the chronology of the shining civilization, which is different from the Empire. Because the chronology is usually determined by the period of revolution of a civilization's mother star around its own star. Therefore, just looking at the time in the spacecraft log, Chen Ming cannot determine the time corresponding to the Empire. What's more, this spacecraft has stopped operating for tens of thousands of years, and there is no log record for the tens of thousands of years in the middle. He can't do it like when he was looking at the log of the scavenger robot and reverse the objective time recorded in the log to reverse the earliest recorded time, and finally determine that the scavenger robot has appeared for at least 30,000 years. Therefore, if he wants to get the specific time when this reconnaissance spacecraft performs the mission, he may have to go to the Shining Civilization Research Institute. There should be a table that can help analyze the time of the shining civilization and the corresponding chronology of the Empire. Chen Ming even thought that he might be ready to go, but he must go. Because he felt that the things about the shining civilization related to this wormhole would be very important, and it was a key time point to understand the shining civilization. Perhaps the shining civilization declined around the time when the wormhole was discovered and prepared to enter the wormhole for exploration. The reason why he had such an idea. Of course, it was because of the scavenger robot and the spaceship he had just obtained. These two things are definitely products of the same period, and they are definitely not too far apart in time. The scavenger robot, originally, simply carried mining drones to mine and develop the initial resources of the galaxy. The nanoforge it carried was also intended for the construction of colonies. The two worked together to build infrastructure before the population of the shining civilization arrived. However, the nanoforge was damaged for some reason, and no one repaired it. It was eventually taken away by the scavenger robot and installed on itself, and has been free to this day. The scavengers also dismantled some materials and parts from the sunken mechanical battleships to arm themselves, and said that they could do so only during the war. This clearly shows that a war broke out during that period. This war eventually led to the bankruptcy of the development plan, and even the shining civilization seemed to have forgotten this place. It was said to be because Chen Ming was not sure whether the shining civilization had already died during this war, or whether the war did not directly lead to the demise of the shining civilization, but only made the shining civilization unable to manage these border areas that needed to be developed. But after having this spaceship that passed through the wormhole, Chen Ming was clear about one thing. The shining civilization must not have died at this time, but gradually died. Because the time point of the reconnaissance mission was either before the battle that caused the battleship graveyard here, or after the battle. If the reconnaissance ship passed through the wormhole before the battle, the shining civilization would not have been rescued. The strength of the reconnaissance ship was so powerful that even if it pierced into the body of the monster, as long as there was fuel, it would never let the people inside die. This is the conclusion that Chen Ming came to after studying the spaceship a little. Therefore, the shining civilization definitely has enough time to rescue. With the technology of the shining civilization, it is definitely not a problem to kill this thing. But no, the shining civilization is not even able to rescue the people who are investigating behind the wormhole. So they are not extinct, but at least they started to decline from here. Therefore, if this specific time can be figured out, maybe the approximate time of the demise of the shining civilization can be determined. With a specific time point, the Empire can use things excavated from many ruins to prove the history of the shining civilization. Find out how the shining civilization, which is countless times more powerful than the current Empire, perished so as to avoid following the old path of the shining civilization. Of course, this is also something that Chen Ming is very interested in. Not only the technology of the shining civilization, he also wants to know the reason for the demise of the shining civilization. He also needs to avoid himself from following the path of the shining civilization, especially when Chen Ming feels that many aspects of his psychic power are similar to those of the shining civilization. 1/3 of the basis of his psychic power is the legacy left by the shining civilization, the mechanical race. Another third are Thornzerg, which has a very close relationship with the mechanical race. The last third are dimensional technologies that Chen Ming does not believe the Shining Civilization has not mastered. There are so many coincidences that it is difficult for Chen Ming not to think too much, so he has more and more curiosity about the Shining Civilization. Of course, everything he just thought of must be confirmed by asking the Shining Civilization Research Institute. After a thorough inspection of the spacecraft's database and the spacecraft itself, Chen Ming also found a portable device in the cockpit of the spacecraft that seems to be of some interest. Chen Ming directly used psychic power to take the device in his hand and got its name: Resonance Channel Communicator. According to the operating principle of the device that Chen Ming's psychic power has mastered, it uses the same frequency band resonance method similar to the main battleship and shield that has been mastered so far to communicate. But the specific effect can only be known after trying it. The psychic minister beside Chen Ming is very sensitive to all changes around him, so he just noticed the spaceship of a model that Chen Ming brought back with his psychic power, which he had never seen before. Now he also noticed the unknown device that Chen Ming suddenly took in his hand. What is this? Chen Ming did not deliberately cover it up, but told the truth. It should be some kind of communicator. It seems to be still running, and its endurance is full, but when Chen Ming pressed it twice, there was no response. Considering the purpose of this spaceship, Chen Ming is not sure whether the person or thing that can communicate with this device is gone. But just when he thought this thing was useless, he suddenly noticed that a resonant signal was emitted to the outside world. Chen Ming was a little surprised and immediately tried to track the source of the signal, but the signal disappeared immediately. He could not detect it. The next moment, a sentence in the language of the Shining Civilization was displayed on the screen of the communicator. "Who are you?" Chen Ming did not answer, but was thinking about how this communicator could be under his control, and he could not find out how this information was transmitted to this device. Is this resonant communication device so outrageous? And he didn't know whether the person behind the communication was a human or a ghost or an AI program. He didn't know whether the person behind the communicator was a person who had survived from the Shining Civilization to this day, or simply a person who had survived from the Shining Civilization to this day. A rash answer was not a good choice, but he didn't seem to have a better choice. This was his only clue. The director of the Psychic Institute next to him also saw the text on the screen, and his heartbeat suddenly accelerated. There are still people alive in the Shining Civilization? This is a big discovery. Although he was not focusing on the project in the direction of Shining Civilization, psychic technology itself was a direction that was inseparable from Shining Civilization. So he must have some basic knowledge, and of course he knew the special significance of discovering the suspected descendants of Shining Civilization. However, Chen Ming was not so optimistic and said, "It is not certain whether they are from the Shining Civilization. That spaceship has existed for at least tens of thousands of years. Even if the descendants have been 30,000 years later, can they still remember this spaceship?" Chen Ming said, and explained the two things: that his psychic power tried to track the transmitted signal but was cut off from the tracking path, and that the communication signal could be sent directly over his psychic power. "So, I am very suspicious of what they are like." Before the director of the Psychic Power Institute had time to respond, a new line of text appeared on the communicator. "Have you discovered the monster in the black hole?" Chen Ming frowned slightly, still thinking about what to do. The director of the Psychic Power Institute really wanted to say something, but after all, this was something Chen Ming had personally obtained with his own efforts, and he did not avoid suspicion of him at all. He let him see these obviously extremely important things, so he couldn't speak directly. "We are the survivors. We want to communicate with you. We have no ill intentions." After this sentence came out, Chen Ming's consideration came to the end. He used psychic power to monitor the device in all aspects without blind spots, and then responded on it. "What is a survivor?" The communication channel was silent for a while, and then a sentence appeared again. "We are the survivors of the Shining, the descendants of the survivors who hid in the world behind the wormhole. We are committed to preserving everything about the Shining." Chen Ming looked at the director of the psychic power, who seemed a little excited beside him, and continued to ask, "What happened to the Shining?" "We can't answer this question." The other end of the communication chose to remain silent. "Why?" "Because we are missing this part of history." "Missing?" Chen Ming suddenly remembered when he was looking for files in the database of the main control personality core in the core colony of the mechanical star field. Similarly, the record of the demise of the shining civilization was also lost. Is it really missing? Chen Ming skipped the topic that might lead to the termination of this communication with doubts and asked, "Why do you hide?" The survivors responded, "Because we are too weak. Hiding is our only way to survive. Please believe us. We really do this only because we are weak." Chen Ming expressed doubts about this, but he did not say it out loud, but asked, "Then why did you contact me? And how did you contact me?" "In fact, you contacted us." "It is true." Chen Ming casually pressed the button on the communicator, who knew that there would be a result. The survivors continued, "And our database stores all records about Shining. And there is a special record about the communicator you found that we have kept, because this record is the reason why we survived." "What is the specific situation?" "Our ancestors once organized a small fleet to enter the wormhole, trying to avoid something. But after passing through the wormhole, they were attacked by the monsters in the black hole. Some of the spacecraft sacrificed themselves to interfere with the monsters, buying time for others to escape the black hole. We thought that all the people and spacecraft in the past had fallen into the black hole, but we didn't expect that there is still a communicator that still exists." "An old story," Chen Ming commented silently in his heart. But logically speaking, these survivors do seem to have no problem. The survivors are most likely a group of people who want to escape when the shining civilization is close to collapse. They may not have very good weapons and equipment. Although those equipment look really good from Chen Ming's perspective, it is only good in terms of technology, not in terms of ability, but it is still useless to use those equipment to fight the black hole monsters. They are probably just a small group of people. Do you know how long it has been since now? 45,372 years. The psychic minister next to him directly converted the units and said, "About 50,000 years ago in Earth time." Chen Ming nodded, ended the one-sided identity confirmation questioning, and started normal communication. "So, who do you think I am?" "A member of the newly born civilization. We noticed that you were trying to track us through psychic power, so we hid in a more hidden place. Please don't try to track us." It seems that these survivors of the Shining Civilization know that the Shining Civilization has completely perished, and they did not say that they were the survivors of the Shining Civilization. Chen Ming asked, "So what do you want to do?" "You should be able to see that I just randomly pressed twice after picking up this device. I don't know if you exist. But you took the initiative to contact me, so there must be some purpose." The communicator was silent again for a while and responded, "Yes. We want to make a deal with you and the civilization behind you. We hope that you can preserve everything that Shining exists so that Shining's past will not disappear because of our demise. We no longer think we can revive a civilization. We just hope that our civilization will be recorded." It sounds like there is nothing wrong. The last group of people in a once prosperous civilization hope that their civilization will at least not be forgotten when facing a newly born civilization. But Chen Ming remained alert and said, "Then you can just give me all the data, and I will give all the data to my civilization." "Sorry, we can't trust you completely yet. We must respect the heritage of our civilization. We can't just hand over everything of our civilization." Chen Ming replied directly and forcefully. "Then we have nothing to talk about." After saying this, the Minister of Psychic Energy was a little anxious. After all, this was an excellent opportunity to contact the Shining Civilization. But Chen Ming raised his hand to stop him, indicating that he knew what he was doing. He is now facing an unknown existence, and he must test it. Facing it with a tough attitude is the simplest and most effective choice to test what the other side is like. At the same time, this is also Chen Ming's own idea. He has always been very gentle to his own kind, but his attitude towards non-same kind is completely different. Although both the Empire and himself have been picking up garbage from the corpses of the Shining Civilization. But no matter what, the Shining Civilization is not a human civilization. So Chen Ming must not be able to empathize with the Shining Civilization. And he actually has one thing to worry about. That is it possible that the Shining Civilization has mastered some extreme means to seize human civilization or something? With the technology of the Shining Civilization, he thinks this is possible. so he will never let down his guard. After Chen Ming's tough reply, the survivors of the Shining Civilization quickly sent another message. Perhaps we can try to win mutual trust. Excuse me, have you killed the monster in the black hole? No. Chen Ming felt that there was nothing to lie about this question. After all, if these survivors are really descendants of the Shining Civilization, they will at least have the ability to detect black holes. Then, as our sincerity to win your trust, we are willing to tell you the weakness of the monster we call Nightmare of the Plane. Weakness? Where is it? The survivor responded. Since you have obtained this communicator, it means that you have fought with the plane Nightmare and found our spaceship. Its weakness is at the location where you found the spaceship, near the part of the body near the intersection of the plane Nightmare and the black hole. That's its weakness. Destroy this part of the body and you can kill it. It just so happened that Chen Ming had carefully observed the appearance of the plane Nightmare before and was able to construct its appearance in his mind. Of course, the location of the Shining Civilization spaceship can also be marked on the body of the plane Nightmare model in his mind. And this place where it intersects with the black hole can be said to be the thickest part of the plane Nightmare. It doesn't make people want to attack it, and coupled with the deterrence of the black hole itself, Chen Ming didn't think it would be a weakness before. He also didn't think that the survivors would lie to him about the sincerity they said in person, which would be very easy to expose. So basically, it can be believed that this is the weakness of the plane Nightmare. I didn't expect that the body that looks the fattest is actually its most vulnerable part. I see. I'll try it and contact you later. Chen Ming was about to end the communication when another message came from the communicator. Wait a minute. We have already informed you of our existence. Can you please tell us what kind of existence you are? We want to know the difference between your civilization and ours. We don't need to be too detailed. We just need to have a basic understanding. Chen Ming thought about whether there were any nouns or adjectives in the language of the Shining Civilization that could describe the empire. We are a country with a democratic system with human beings as the main species or civilization. You can call us the human empire. When we developed the ruins of your civilization, we knew that you were an imperial civilization. You should understand what I said. In the past 6 months, Chen Ming had also visited the Shining Civilization Research Institute to learn the language of the Shining Civilization, and of course he had learned some of their related knowledge. In particular, the knowledge that the Shining Civilization was actually an imperial system left him with a very deep impression. After all, this is indeed a bit difficult. Because the Shining Civilization calls itself Shining, not Shining Empire. On the human side, it is an alternative democratic system with centralized military power, but it calls itself an empire. This contrast is hard not to leave a deep impression on people. The survivors didn't seem to pay much attention to this and quickly replied, "Yes, we can understand. What about you? What kind of existence are you in your civilization, and what kind of relationship do you have with the human empire?" Chen Ming thought about it for a while and said, "This is also the question I want to ask you. We are just a group of hundreds of survivors with only very basic social relationships, and I am just a person with some social skills, so I am here to communicate with you." In the survivor's response, people refers to the species of Shining Civilization itself, so Chen Ming directly translated it into a reference that is easy to understand. After writing down their responses, Chen Ming also responded to this question. I am one of the top psychics in the human empire. As for the relationship with the empire, it is a friendly cooperative relationship. Cooperative relationship? As an imperial civilization, Shining seems to have some misunderstanding of what the empire is like. In a democratic civilization, the management of some aspects is more relaxed, and not all psychics have to serve the ruling class. The survivors seem to be unable to accept this situation. After all, the disadvantages of letting psychics run wild are very obvious. Here, psychics can be equated with the ruling class. Our emperor is the most powerful psychic. Only the most powerful psychic can suppress other psychics from making mistakes. Chen Ming asked back, "Aren't you afraid that the emperor is not capable enough? Is his virtue unworthy of the position?" The survivors said again, "Every powerful psychic has a learning ability far beyond that of any ordinary person. The ability of a psychic who can become an emperor is definitely worthy of his position. Moral issues are definitely not shackles that restrict His Majesty the Emperor." Chen Ming was not interested in arguing with them about such ideological and political issues, and directly threw out a question that he thought might be interesting. Then is there an emperor in your small group of hundreds of people? There was silence on the other end of the communicator. There was silence for a long time, obviously choked by Chen Ming's question. An emperor of the shining civilization is indeed worthy of respect. No matter what kind of person he is, as long as he can rely on his skills and power to maintain the shining civilization, he is a capable person, at least in terms of ability. However, the emperor of a small group of hundreds of people mentioned by the survivors themselves is simply a big joke. Chen Ming is equivalent to pointing at their noses and scolding them. Whether they have an emperor or not, it is a very ridiculous situation. If they have an emperor, it is a joke. If they don't, they have given up even their own system. What qualifications do they have to criticize the political system of the empire to which Chen Ming belongs? The survivors also understand this, so they gave in and said, "I am very sorry. We have offended your system abruptly." Chen Ming himself was not interested in this topic, so he did not pursue it too much. "I hope we can coexist peacefully, instead of clashing over unimportant things." Yes, that should be the case. Then let's talk about it later. Chen Ming put away the terminal and looked up at the porthole at the highest point near the black hole. The director of the psychic power next to him immediately asked, "What should we do?" "First, go and see if the information is true, and then send back the news about the survivors of the shining civilization. I will take the communicator." Okay. The director of the psychic power had no opinion. Anyway, Chen Ming had the final say on all mechanical-related things that he had touched. It was useless for others to say anything. Chen Ming spent a little time compiling the document, recording the whole process of his investigation and discovery of the spacecraft of the shining civilization and the discovery of the survivors. After letting the director of the psychic power look through it and finding no problems, Chen Ming directly sent a copy of the document to everyone in his address book who was qualified to see it and let them sort it out themselves. By the way, Chen Ming also turned off the terminal directly to avoid being disturbed when he was doing things later. After the news of the survivors was announced, there would be at least a platoon of people who would call him. Chen Ming put away the terminal and asked the director of the Psychic Institute, "Do you want to stay and watch the follow-up?" "Anyway, I am not responsible for studying the shining civilization. I am not in a hurry." Chen Ming nodded, gave orders to the Queen of the Zerg, and organized a new batch of main fleets. He roughly estimated the combat effectiveness of the plane Nightmare, and finally decided to get 300 Zerg main battleships, which should be enough. The newly reorganized main fleet appeared near the highest point soon after, and after showing his face, he entered the phase space with the highest point, lurking in the phase space, preparing for another raid. At this time, in the black hole horizon, the situation of the plane Nightmare did not seem to have changed much compared to before. The huge wound that almost penetrated half of its body caused by Chen Ming's Zerg fleet and various weapons in a concentrated attack has disappeared, and the wound on the back of its body has almost completely recovered. The black hole matter that spilled out seems to have been reabsorbed by it. This monster really has a very strong recovery ability. However, the impact is not great. Chen Ming's target this time is not the previous wound, but its fat belly that is stuck near the black hole exit, probably the belly. The Zerg fleet in the phase space is slowly approaching, and the director of the psychic energy suddenly whispered again, "These ships seem..." "What's wrong? It feels a little different from the ones you sent before." "Yes," Chen Ming admitted. "I changed some weapon distribution." The weapons originally carried by the Zerg were all the weapons he intended to use for testing. In the first wave of tests, Chen Ming has basically determined the effects of most of the weapons. So taking advantage of the time to contact the survivors just now and prepare a new Zerg fleet, Chen Ming specially made a batch of new weapons that were useful in the test results just now. It was evenly installed on half of the 300 battleships. As for the remaining half of the ships, Chen Ming installed a new arc launcher that he copied after studying the principle of the arc launcher. The time that has just passed is enough for him to thoroughly understand the technology of this thing. This has increased the total number of arc launchers by hundreds of times. It can only be said that Chen Ming always feels that this weapon has great potential, but lacks a suitable combat environment. Therefore, he plans to test the applicable environment of this somewhat special weapon. It just so happens that the target has not exploded just now, and it can be tested again. It is also because Chen Ming's Zerg fleet now has some unified weapons that the Minister of Psionics feels that the fleet seems to be somewhat different from the messy situation just now. After explaining, Chen Ming continued to let the Zerg fleet approach the location where it was previously raided from the phase space. In the dark, the nightmare of the plane seemed to sense the danger again. This talent belonging to psychics and psychic creatures can tell him that danger is coming, but there is no way for him to deal with the danger. Its limbs were waving wildly, and the cracks were constantly biting the surrounding space, but without direct contact with the phase space. It had no way to tear the barrier between the two spaces. Chen Ming even had the time and leisure to adjust the firing time of each weapon according to the distance of each Hercules in the fleet. Ensure that the ammunition, energy bombs, or energy beams fired by each weapon, as well as any form of attack means, can hit at the same time. Strive to take it away directly in one wave and not give it a chance to counterattack. The Zerg consciousness in the Zerg warships is connected to each other by the hive mind, so there is no problem in doing this. It only took less than a minute for the Zerg fleet to arrange the time to open fire. The Purgatory Ray began to gather energy, and the other energy weapons began to show signs of charging. All the live ammunition weapons opened fire earlier than the energy weapons. When the live ammunition that almost formed a wall of steel in the phase space hit the plane Nightmare and tore the plane Nightmare's gelatinous skin. A red ray accompanied by hundreds of concentrated arcs that seemed to illuminate the purple black hole hit the wound torn by the live ammunition weapon almost without any time difference. It penetrated the fat body. The plane Nightmare, which was still twisting to defend because of sensing danger, froze, but did not stop. Its body, its corpse was thrown out with inertia, and it was separated from the half of its body stuck in the black hole. The activation of the Zerg Hercules class directly cut it in half. The lower half of the body was directly sucked into the black hole, and its upper half of the body twitched a few times, and black hole matter flowed out from the gap. Immediately, a gravitational storm was caused within the black hole's horizon. Chen Ming immediately used psychic energy to teleport himself to the black hole's horizon. The psychic energy released dimensional power to block the surrounding space, and all the black hole matter ejected from the corpse was restrained, sent into the phase space, and sent to the origin galaxy at the other end of the wormhole. Although only half of the body of the plane Nightmare was left, he still had to ensure the integrity of the body to prevent the remaining half from falling into the black hole like the lower half. He still had a use for this body. The gravitational wave in the horizon gradually subsided. Chen Ming also returned to the highest point and said to the director of the Psychic Power Institute, "It's solved. There is no problem with the intelligence. That is its weakness. Let's continue to talk to the survivors." Wait. Chen Ming's movements suddenly stopped because he noticed that the position of the wormhole that brought him here on the sensor at the highest point was undergoing unprecedented changes. It was moving. It was no longer being pulled by the gravity of the black hole, but was like a spaceship heading to other galaxies. Chen Ming and the director of the Psychic Power Institute looked at each other, and it was obvious that neither of them understood what was going on. This strange situation made him alert. He immediately released his psychic power to detect what was happening on the wormhole. At the same time, he also observed the situation of the wormhole at the other end. However, Chen Ming did not sense any special situation, nor did he find any changes on the other side of the wormhole. But the wormhole seemed to be moving, and the nearest galaxy in the direction of movement seemed to be a galaxy with dim stars. At the current speed of the wormhole, it would take at least a few days for it to reach that galaxy. Chen Ming told him that he could come back later to see what would happen. Let's continue to talk to the survivors. Chen Ming said so, and the Minister of Psychic Energy certainly had no objection. Chen Ming also took out the terminal that had just been closed and sent a message. "The nightmare of the plane is dead, and there is no problem with the information you provided." The communicator replied quickly, "Okay, then in your opinion, have we shown our sincerity?" "No problem. I can have a certain degree of trust in you." "So, how do you want me to show my sincerity?" The survivors seemed to have thought of a way and said, "We can trade. You know our situation. Our ancestors came here to avoid some unknown things, and because of the nightmare of the plane, they can no longer return to the original world. We don't know what happened in the past tens of thousands of years, nor do we know what kind of existence you are. So we can trade some information. Use your information and the information of tens of thousands of years that have passed to trade with us. We are the survivors of the Shining Civilization, and we have a lot of things that can be used to trade with you. It seems to be fine. The survivors hold the resources left by the Shining Civilization, and it is normal to use these resources to trade for information they cannot obtain. Just like Chen Ming is actually very curious about the survivors of the Shining Civilization, it is reasonable for them to be curious about human civilization. And they also said that they could not return to their original place because of the nightmare of the plane. Even if the nightmare of the plane has been killed by Chen Ming now, it is the same. Because after Chen Ming killed the nightmare of the plane, Chen Ming became the one who might threaten them. They can only hope to get more information from Chen Ming. Then Chen Ming must not really tell the news directly. He can't just trade like this. The transaction between civilizations is definitely not just a transaction. It involves too many things. He can't make a decision alone. So he has to leave this matter to someone capable. After considering it, Chen Ming responded, "This matter is of great importance. I need to discuss it with the Empire." The director of the psychic power on the side looked relieved. The survivors did not seem to be too anxious and responded normally. "We are waiting for your good news." After the communication ended, in the universe outside the observable universe of the Empire behind the wormhole, in a dark star field, a space station floats here. The space station is dead silent at this time, with no signs of biological activity. But in a small room in the temporal part of this space, a communicator exactly the same as the one in Chen Ming's hand is lit, and a newly recorded recording is transmitted from it. After the communicator repeatedly plays the complete communication between Chen Ming and the survivors, a hand suddenly reached out from the darkness and turned off the communicator. This small space station lost all its light. This was a special hand, its skin changing back and forth between the luster of metal and rust. And this hand seemed to have a liquid metal-like quality, but it looked very different from Chen Ming's liquid metal. The owner of this hand said, "We have initially won his trust." Another person hidden in the darkness asked, "How long will it take to advance the next plan?" "Patience, patience. The queen is still sleeping. We still have time." Not long after, Chen Ming and the director of the psychic power returned to the Legion headquarters together. Then they were taken to the Shining Civilization Research Institute together. The main conference hall of the institute was already full of people, not only the Legion, but also a group of familiar faces of Chen Ming and people from the Empire's Special Research Institute on Shining Civilization. They surrounded Chen Ming as soon as they came up, so that Chen Ming had to work hard to walk to the stage of the conference hall. After sending out the new communication record, Chen Ming transferred most of his consciousness, leaving only a part of his body consciousness here to answer other people's questions. Anyway, the control of the communicator is in his hands, and the Empire will find the most suitable transaction method from his transaction with the survivors. This is the situation he wants to see most after passing the information of the survivors back. Chen Ming's main consciousness soon came to the origin galaxy. In the phase space here, half of the body of the nightmare of the plane is placed. Surrounded by various detection devices controlled by the extraordinary people in the Legion headquarters with the help of Chen Ming's power, they are detecting the state of the body and confirming the effects of the weapons used before. Although there are different weapons suitable for different enemies, these data can also be used as an important reference. Chen Ming took out the results of the previous test, put them together with the results of the second test that ended almost instantly, and compared them slightly. The situation of the new data is basically the same as before. Basically, Titan-level weapons, live ammunition weapons, and arc weapons performed the best. However, Chen Ming knew that the performance of live ammunition weapons was good because the situation was special. Because Chen Ming has discovered that there is a layer of gravity shield on the surface of the nightmare of the plane, and the gravity shield has an excellent distortion effect on the entity, So the actual effect of live ammunition weapons is not very good. The reason why live ammunition weapons are easy to use. That is because the nightmare of the plane itself is under the gravity restriction of the black hole, and it cannot control the gravity of the black hole, otherwise it would have come out long ago. Therefore, even if the nightmare of the plane itself has a layer of shield to block live ammunition, the live ammunition will fly towards the vicinity of the black hole under the traction of the gravity of the black hole. The effect of live ammunition is very obvious in the end. And the purgatory ray is purely a powerful brick flying. So in the end, the best effect of all weapons is the arc weapon. Although the performance of the arc weapon was not good at the beginning. But as the subsequent experiments progressed, Chen Ming also found some other damage caused by the arc on the body of the nightmare of the plane. It can be seen that these injuries are deep and shallow, heavy and light, very strange, as if the damage of the arc weapon is random. And in fact, it is indeed the case. The nature of the concentrated arc launcher is to imitate the arc that erupts when the radiation energy system of the spacecraft is overloaded. This arc can indeed penetrate the armor directly, and even penetrate the shield that has not been completely dissipated. It is not just empty talk, and it can indeed cause damage. But the arc generated by this overload, or all the arcs generated for this reason, are random and unpredictable. No one knows the angle of the arc that erupts, the intensity of the arc, and whether it can penetrate directly after hitting or only hit a part, causing a little damage. It is this nature that makes the damage caused by the arc launcher very random. When it is weak, it may not even penetrate the steel plate. When it is strong, it can directly penetrate the limbs of the nightmare of the plane and even kill it directly after concentrating firepower. So Chen Ming feels that this weapon is really one of the most valuable and potential weapons he has ever seen. It can ignore the gravitational field, armor, and shield to cause the final damage. Then this randomness becomes an acceptable problem. Because when there are enough ships equipped with arc launchers, the expectation of this randomness will become more and more stable. It can be said that it is a perfect match for the number of ships that the Zerg fleet has the most. Chen Ming felt that he could ask the designer if he had any ideas for cooperation. After reading the value of using the plane nightmare as a target, Chen Ming focused on the value of the plane nightmare itself. For this kind of thing that is roughly considered a psychic species, whether it is a psychic creature or a psychic, Chen Ming just happened to have a way to deal with them. The robot controlled by Chen Ming appeared next to the body of the plane nightmare, floating in the orbit of Gaia in a blink of an eye. He stretched out his hand and pressed it on the skin of the body. Feeling the gravity from the plane nightmare's body, he covered the body with psychic fluctuations and penetrated the body from the outside to the inside. Starting from the details, he thoroughly observed what kind of existence the plane nightmare was. In this process, in addition to investigating, Chen Ming was also using one of the most fundamental properties of his psychic energy, that is, the part of the power that belonged to the mind-running entity, to devour the dimensional power that originally belonged to the plane nightmare and was of the same origin as Chen Ming's power, and gradually became familiar with this power and gradually mastered it. Soon after, Chen Ming extracted his own psychic fluctuations from the body, and also extracted the part of the plane nightmare's power that he had devoured from himself and stuffed it back into the body. He didn't need this power, he just needed the way to use this power. Chen Ming clenched his fist. After getting familiar with the working principle of this new power mode again, he came to the wormhole of the origin galaxy. He removed the space locking device that he had installed here to prevent things from approaching the other side of the wormhole. He released his own psychic energy fluctuations in the direction of the wormhole and wrapped around the wormhole like a chain. His psychic energy fluctuations replaced the space locking device. He used the power of the nightmare of the plane to tear the dimension to reversely lock the wormhole, which was related to the dimensional power. He gradually stabilized the wormhole, making it more stable than before and more suitable for spacecraft to pass through. This is the new power that Chen Ming has mastered. And not only wormholes, any matter related to his dimension, his power can show stronger stability than before. Even if he repairs the space gap, he can repair it better than before, and it is more difficult to break through. Chen Ming put away his own power and installed the space locking device again. Although his psychic energy can be effective as long as it is maintained, it can replace all the functions of the space locking device and even have some additional functions. But having an extra insurance is not a bad thing. Chen Ming doesn't mind the trouble. After all, the value of a stable wormhole is very special. Wormholes exist naturally in the universe, connecting two unrelated areas in the universe. They do not need to consume a lot of resources when activated like a stargate. The value of connecting the two areas alone is already very high. Not to mention that Chen Ming's wormhole even directly connects to the outside of the observable universe, not to mention the value. However, there are almost no natural wormholes in the Empire at present. Most of the wormholes have been extracted from singularities and used to make stargates. The reason for doing so instead of leaving some of the original natural wormholes is very simple. Wormholes themselves also have disadvantages. For example, the location is not good. If the location of two connected wormholes is not good, there is no need to travel back and forth, and the wormholes are meaningless. It is better to extract singularities and manually create stargates. In this way, the Empire can also conduct overall regulation and try to ensure that each star field has at least one stargate. Artificial stargates can also be connected to each other, unlike natural wormholes that can only shuttle between two wormholes. Moreover, natural wormholes are not stable enough, and there is a high risk of crossing them. No one can guarantee that there will be no problems with wormholes. Once there is a problem, the main battleship may be broken inside. Of course, these problems are not a problem for Chen Ming's wormhole, and Chen Ming can solve them. The problem is on the other side of the wormhole. After the nightmare of the plane in the black hole was killed, the wormhole on the other side ran away. Chen Ming has currently sent a small fleet to track it. I don't know whether this is a good thing or a bad thing. It should be possible. The good thing is that the wormhole can move away from the black hole in the future, and if the wormhole at that end enters a normal galaxy in the future, even if it is a not-so-good galaxy, it can also allow people to settle down and build a new base. And if the wormhole continues to stay near the black hole, it is obviously not okay. But the disadvantage is that Chen Ming doesn't know where the wormhole will go in the end. Although the wormhole has a direction of movement, there is also a galaxy in this direction. But who knows whether the wormhole will stay in that galaxy, or like the black hole, it will stay for a while and then move on to the next galaxy. The situation of this wormhole is really unprecedented. It can only be said that it is worthy of being the other end of the wormhole that can be called a cosmic wonder. If it doesn't do something fancy, it will be a shame to its name of a cosmic wonder. At present, it seems that this wormhole will take about 2 days to reach the first galaxy that overlaps with the trajectory. Chen Ming has planned to go to the wormhole to take a look and find out what is there. What special existence attracted it? Or is it because the nightmare of the plane used its own power to attract the wormhole, and now the wormhole is just returning to its original position? In short, he has to investigate. But there is no rush. This matter can wait a little. Because he has more things waiting for him to do. For example, he had to deal with the body of the plane nightmare still floating in the orbit of Gaia. Such a big thing is just there, you can't just watch it, right? Chen Ming has already thought of its specific use, but it still needs some small preparations. He can do this while doing other things later. As for the specific content of other things, Chen Ming needs to report the test results of the weapons borrowed from several departments. Those data are important data for determining the direction of future weapon research. He also has to talk to the researchers who made the concentrated arc launcher about cooperation. This kind of weapon, which can have a very good performance as long as the scale is increased, is simply tailor-made for him. In addition, the meeting triggered by the news he brought back about the survivors of the Shining Civilization seems to have been almost over. The basic content has been discussed, and Chen Ming remembers all the content of the discussion, and there are a lot of contents that have nothing to do with him. The only related content seems to be about the communicator. However, after the discussion at the meeting, no one had any objection to Chen Ming continuing to hold the communicator. There was really no objection. The communication between civilizations will never be friendly, especially when one civilization is from its peak to decline and the other civilization is coming out of stagnation. Everyone has a guess in their mind about what a civilization in such a state will do. So after the discussion, Almost everyone who attended the meeting did not believe that the human empire and the shining civilization would coexist peacefully if they collided directly. But the things to consider between civilizations and individuals of other civilizations, especially between an individual who has the ability to destroy a civilization, are different. Individuals have feelings. For the empire, there will be even less to consider because Chen Ming's but is always on the side of humans. And Chen Ming is also very happy to listen to other people's suggestions at some time when he is not professional, and even took the initiative to find someone capable in this area to guide the content of the conversation. So the Empire has no objection to Chen Ming's willingness to hold the communicator and be responsible for the subsequent communication. As for the shining civilization, they have to consider many things other than interests. Not only do they need to consider the attitude of the Empire towards them, but also the attitude of Chen Ming. They must be more careful when communicating with Chen Ming and put aside their pride in the shining civilization. No matter what their purpose is, it is absolutely right to please Chen Ming, who has the power to communicate with them. After the meeting, Chen Ming spent quite a while to deal with the follow-up matters of the survivors. Even if the meeting is over, there are still many people and many things that need to be discussed with Chen Ming in private. Chen Ming also received guidance from various professionals who specialize in the study of culture, language, civilization, and other fields. They guided Chen Ming on the way and content of contacting the survivors of the shining civilization in the future, and they also gave Chen Ming some templates. At least he would not make mistakes if he directly used the templates when communicating. They even helped Chen Ming list a list of clichés, which was specifically used to cliché the survivors, to see if there was a chance to directly learn more about the shining civilization without trading with the survivors. Of course, it is okay not to cliché. After all, not all conversations can be put into the template. And clichés only speed up the progress of some trials, which does not have much significance and impact. Anyway, from Chen Ming's perspective, no matter who in the empire, or even himself, actually has no idea of obtaining intelligence from the survivors through normal transactions. Instead, they want to obtain this information in a more efficient and quick way. It's just that the survivors hid well, and Chen Ming had no way to try to track them. So for the time being, he still communicated and traded with the survivors normally. But once the opportunity to catch the survivors is caught, neither the Empire nor Chen Ming will miss it. After being busy with the survivors for a long time, Chen Ming finally returned to the space station of the Research Institute in the galaxy he rented. And the first thing he did after returning to the space station, he ran back to his office and packaged the weapon research data and sent it to the project teams that provided the weapons, and sent a communication plan about arc weapons to the headquarters Ship Research Institute. At the same time, he began to write a document. The document recorded various information about the nightmare of the plane, including that it is a psychic species, has the ability to control gravity, has very strong combat power, looks ugly, and other characteristics are written down. Even if people have never really come into contact with the nightmare of the plane, they can still have a basic understanding of it, and they can also know that this is an unprecedented powerful species that the Empire has never encountered, and it involves various complex technical aspects, and has extremely high research value. And Chen Ming also attached several records of fighting with it in the file. It can be seen that in addition to controlling gravity psychic energy, it even has the ability to tear space barriers. Of course, Chen Ming deliberately concealed a little news. That is, the news that the nightmare of the plane is dead and the body was recovered intact by him. However, Chen Ming brought back the broken limb he broke in the first wave of raids. And a new area was specially arranged for placement, and various facilities that might be used have begun to be dispatched. Anyone with a little ability would notice Chen Ming's little move. Then he sent this document to all members of the Institute who participated in this project and asked everyone if they were interested in participating in the new project. The new project was not clearly stated, but he was of course referring to the research project on the limbs of the nightmare of the plane. As a result, Chen Ming immediately received hundreds of replies waiting for him to deal with. He immediately made a list and began to screen the people who were suitable to participate in this project according to each person's profile. All capable people should have been allowed, but if they were important members of Chen Ming's main battleship project, he would first confirm whether they had the ability to take care of two projects at the same time. If not, he would refuse. But even if he refused, he hinted at the corpse of the nightmare of the plane in his reply, which was also a little trick he made to attract people. Although the development behind the wormhole was temporarily blocked, there were not so many messy things in front of the wormhole. The research colony planned by Chen Ming, which was coordinated and constructed by Hui Huang, is developing little by little. With almost unlimited resources and technical support, it is absolutely no problem to build a research center that Chen Ming needs to meet his research direction. And along with the construction of the research center, of course, there is the infrastructure that can provide people who may join this research center in the future. Now that the research center is there and the supporting facilities are there, the only thing left is to recruit people. Relying on these free resources and various luxury goods, plus the corpse of the nightmare of the plane for research. It should not be a big problem to increase the attractiveness of Gaia's star and attract some professional researchers. Although it is not necessarily true that the psychics of the Psychic Research Institute can be completely attracted. After all, there is a fairy tree that covers the sky and the sun at the headquarters of the Psychic Research Institute, which is very attractive to psychics. Even Chen Ming occasionally goes to the Psychic Research Institute to feel the spiritual comfort of the ancient fairy tree and learn how to cultivate the fairy tree. After all, he also has a fairy tree. Although it is only half a person tall now, he is also thinking about cultivating the fairy tree to the scale of the Psychic Research Institute. Just when Chen Ming was selecting the current people with his hands and thinking about the future in his mind, the two directors who had cooperated with Chen Ming more often suddenly pushed open the door of Chen Ming's office and rushed in. After entering, the two old men sat on the sofa without saying a word. When doing projects, Chen Ming always put aside his identity and treated himself as an ordinary researcher. When getting along with other people, at least when getting along with the two directors, there are not too many rules and regulations. Instead, it is very casual. So Chen Ming didn't care what the two were doing and continued to pick the people he needed. As a result, the director of the psychic power saw that Chen Ming ignored him, and he took out a box of fairy leaves from the cabinet next to him and made himself a cup of tea. While drinking, he coughed from time to time to attract Chen Ming's attention. Now Chen Ming knew why the two came. It is normal to be discovered that poaching. But he pretended not to see it and continued to send replies to those who were willing to participate in the new project. Wait until everyone has sent almost everything. He finally looked up and asked, "What are you doing?" The ship director spread his hands, indicating that he didn't know why he was here. He pointed to the psychic director next to him, indicating that he was the one who brought him here. The psychic director drank tea and said to Chen Ming in a dull voice, "I know what you want to do." Chen Ming asked back, "What am I going to do?" "Poaching. First, release the severed limb to the people in the entire project, and then when the time is right, release the news that you have a complete body. There will definitely be a group of people running to your side." Chen Ming shrugged. He didn't deliberately hide this matter. It was normal for the poach to come and cause trouble for Chen Ming. But Chen Ming also thought of a way to deal with it. It's just an academic exchange. The journey is a little far, so it's reasonable for me to prepare some accommodation for them, right? My environment is good and there are many resources. If they want to stay, that's their business. That's the truth. The director of the Psychic Energy Institute said, "But the procedures for your colony." "My colony has been declared, and it's a legal colony," Chen Ming said, and directly took out a paper document that he had obtained some time ago when the colony had not yet been released. It is a registration document for a colony. Although most of the places on it are still empty, it has been stamped by the Empire's Colonial Development Department. Chen Ming can fill in the various empty places on it at will. As long as he fills them in, his colony will be a legal colony. The Minister of Psychic Energy stared at the document for a long time and asked, "Why don't I remember that there is a law that can be used to establish legal colonies outside the Empire?" "Because it uses the pioneering law." The director of the Psychic Energy Institute almost spit out a mouthful of tea. The pioneering law was a law that the Empire once promised various benefits to encourage pioneering, and the management of pioneers to establish colonies on their own was very loose. But after the pioneering era ended, it gradually fell out of use. As a result, Chen Ming suddenly said this, which sounded strange. It's just that although what Chen Ming said sounds absurd at first, it's actually okay. Restarting the pioneering era is already the general direction of the future decided by the ruling class of the empire. The restart of the pioneering law is also a foregone conclusion. As long as the war with the mechanical race is over, the empire will start its steps again. Even if the pioneering era is not restarted, Chen Ming has the ability to ask the empire for such a document. This is the privilege Chen Ming has. Chen Ming continued to say to the director of the psychic power, "And you have to know that my place is quite far away from the empire, and the sequelae of the dimensional infection have not yet spread there. In my place, people can give birth to the next generation normally." Although with the development of cryostasis technology, the age gap between people in the empire has caused irreversible damage to some close relationships. And things like marriage are no longer a fixed process before secular reproduction. Although it will not disappear, the people do not pay much attention to these. To be precise, the people in the more developed areas do not pay attention to them. Some underdeveloped areas still attach importance to these. After all, the people in these places do not have many opportunities to leave the mother planet, nor do they have many opportunities to use cryosleep technology. Some other high-level officials of the empire also attach great importance to these relationships. For example, Chen Ming himself was taken into marriage because he was valued. After all, power can benefit the people around him, and a circle of power is more stable than a single source of power. However, reproduction is the instinct of living things. Most people are willing to leave their descendants, but if the conditions are not suitable, they can leave them. Just like now, the entire empire is still affected by the sequelae of dimensional infection, but under the overall good situation of the empire, it is not too serious. It is precisely because of this that the empire did not collapse directly because of the sequelae of dimensional infection when it was entangled in a twilight before. But that was because the conditions were not suitable. Since Chen Ming's territory can meet the needs and conditions of some people, why not go? Therefore, Chen Ming's colony is very attractive to many young researchers. There are even certain pioneering laws. The director of the Psychic Energy Institute found it hard to imagine how many people would follow Chen Ming if he really released the news of what he could provide. He had personally followed Chen Ming to the vicinity of the wormhole and saw what kind of preparations Chen Ming had made. So he was very worried. And Chen Ming continued to add, "And I can open the Stargate 24 hours a day." 24 hours? Yes, I have the resources to open the Stargate like this. There is also a Stargate at the headquarters. It only takes more than 10 minutes to get to me, which is faster than running back and forth in the Institute. You can go back anytime you want. I won't make any restrictions. Although Chen Ming said so. But the director of the Psychic Energy Institute knew that everyone knew that there were countless unknown things in the world behind the wormhole. How many people would really come back after going there? Although Chen Ming opened the channel for people to go back and forth, if they really went there and came back, their weight in Chen Ming's heart would definitely decrease. Is there really anyone willing to bear the cost of jumping back and forth? Seeing that the director of the Psychic Power Institute seemed to be thinking about something, Chen Ming continued. "In addition, the climate in my colony is quite good, and do you remember the fairy tree I took away before? It has also started to grow. I remember that you are quite old, right? If you find a place to retire, I will." Stop. The director of the Psychic Power Institute waved his hand and said, "Are you trying to pry me? I have to try, right? In fact, I don't have to snatch people from the Legion and you, but the capable people I know are all in the Legion, and I don't know the people I contact outside." The director of the Psychic Power had no way to deal with Chen Ming, and seeing this, he took the opportunity to step down and said, "I will help you find the right one, and then you can judge it yourself and snatch less of my people." No problem. When Chen Ming and the director of the Psychic Power Institute were arguing, the director of the ship department, who had been idle for half a day, couldn't stand it anymore. "You guys are just talking about this?" The director of the Psychic Power Institute stared and said, "Yes, Chen Ming is also trying to steal your people. Don't you have any ideas?" The director of the ship department spread his hands and said, "I don't care. He is already very old, and he can clearly feel that his body is getting worse day by day. He is not a psychic. and he doesn't have a strong spirit and a strong body because of the spirit. Maybe he will retire in a few years. And not to mention that he will really retire at that time. Even now, he is very interested in Chen Ming. After all, Chen Ming has a lot of resources at hand, and he has the support of an Wuping, who can be said to be his half-brother in biotechnology. Looking at the empire, anyone who is related to Chen Ming's involvement would not want to run to Chen Ming to get a taste of the rich resources. Even the director of the ship department is no exception, although they started the research on phase technology and phase ships first. But only half a year had passed, and Chen Ming had already walked ahead of them. Many times, Chen Ming could write out the answers to the results that should have been achieved through long-term testing and research alone. This situation really made it difficult for people to have any idea of competing. In terms of psychic power, he might be able to compete with Chen Ming because of the particularity and uniqueness of psychic power, but in terms of pure ship capabilities, there was really nothing to compete with someone like Chen Ming. Moreover, the director of the Ship Institute even planned to retire directly after completing Chen Ming's project. No longer engage in new projects, just be a retired professor and occasionally teach classes. He didn't care whether Chen Ming snatched people or not. He had already seen it through. He could see that Chen Ming was always alone. So it made no difference whether those researchers who were snatched away stayed in the empire or went to Chen Ming's side, as long as what they did in the end was always beneficial to people. The director of the Psychic Power Institute could hear what the director of the Ship Institute meant. Although the two of them were not very good at dealing with each other, the two departments had been competing with each other for decades under their leadership, and they could still see each other's thoughts very clearly. It was the kind of thing that knew what the other party was going to say as soon as he opened his mouth. He did not say much by relying on his status, but turned to Chen Ming and said, "Okay, then I won't talk about anything else. The task has been assigned to the matter of the nightmare of the plane. Although we haven't encountered similar things yet, we must do preventive cases. Otherwise, if the Empire encounters this thing in the future, it may have to use human lives to pile up. Who knows which black hole in the Empire will drill out a nightmare of the plane in the future? I have to go to work on this matter." The director of the Psychic Power Institute stood up. "Fortunately, I went out with you before, otherwise I don't know what to do." He waved at Chen Ming and left Chen Ming's office. The director of the Psychic Power Institute left, and the director of the Ship Institute did not stay for long. Although he had already thought of retreating in his heart, he had to finish all the things on his hands. In addition to Chen Ming's battleship project, he also had a lot of things to do. After the two left, Chen Ming did not continue to rest. He also had quite a lot of things to do. He first spent half a day to gather those who he had agreed to participate in the Plane Nightmare project and held a meeting. Then he did a secondary test and screened out some researchers who looked good on paper, but whose actual abilities were not necessarily suitable. Of course, it was not that they were not capable, but just not suitable. After all, the research direction of the Plane Nightmare Corps must be psychic armor, psychic weapons, psychic creatures, black hole technology, gravity technology, space technology, and the like. You can't put the people who were originally responsible for the research of the automation system in Chen Ming's battleship project into it, and the Plane Nightmare can't be automated. Its corpse is full of black hole matter. Even if Chen Ming wanted to imitate the situation of the phase behemoth patriarch to make the corpse move again, it wouldn't work. But he also thought of the scavenger. Although this thing couldn't beat the Plane Nightmare, it was at least at the same level. Perhaps using a mechanical body of this size to cover the skin of the nightmare of the plane may have a similar effect. But this is definitely not something that can be done now. So Chen Ming only temporarily asked people to withdraw from the project, and he could recruit more people if there is a chance in the future. In addition to eliminating a group of people with unsuitable abilities, Chen Ming also brought out a group of people who he thought needed his priority after testing. These people's abilities are obviously more suitable for Chen Ming's new project than those who were eliminated. When the initial stage of this new project, that is, the research progress on the limbs of the nightmare of the plane, is almost done, he will decide who can participate based on the current list of personnel and the actual project progress. Chen Ming also asked the Legion for a new experimental site and took the limbs of the nightmare of the plane out separately, treating it as a separate major project so as not to affect the project on the main ship. By the way, it can also be regarded as giving others some opportunities to get in touch with this project. After all, the people who participate in a small project under Chen Ming's big project will only be Chen Ming's people, at least people related to Chen Ming. There is no way that an independent project can recruit more people. By the way, this can also cooperate with the Minister of Psychic Power. He said that he could help Chen Ming find people, so Chen Ming must give a reason to find people. In addition to the new project, Chen Ming's cooperation request with the research team that developed the arc launcher and the concentrated arc launcher had a little problem. It seems that his action was too obvious. As soon as he and the group sent a cooperation request, a bunch of people immediately rushed to the group, like sharks smelling the smell. A bunch of cooperation invitations like Chen Ming filled their group's mailbox. This is a technical matter in itself. Chen Ming is not angry if others compete, and he will not use privileges to stop it. He just used deep maintenance psychic power to optimize the sample that was tested before. Then he sent the optimized new concentrated arc launcher to the research team, and he still gave them the same cooperation share as before. So in the end, the research and development team agreed to cooperate with Chen Ming and sold part of the patent rights to Chen Ming. Although Chen Ming used to use whatever he saw when installing weapons and other things on his own spacecraft, and used whatever was useful, and he relied on his own ability to crack the technology and bought materials to make it. But Chen Ming still has to respect the developers in the development of technology. Moreover, Chen Ming really thinks that the arc launcher is a weapon with a lot of sayings, and he is very optimistic about the market prospects of this weapon. He believes that the arc weapon can have a good effect even if it is not installed on his Zerg warships, but on the Empire's warships. After being busy for most of the day, Chen Ming finally finished the things around him. After he confirmed that there was nothing he needed to do for the time being, he turned his attention to the wormhole. The wormhole at the other end of the wormhole of the origin galaxy was still approaching the galaxy that Chen Ming had previously scouted from a distance, and it was expected to arrive at that galaxy in one day. Before it actually arrived, Chen Ming was ready to investigate first. The Supreme Point had already reached the edge of the galaxy through a jump in advance. What he had to do now was to go to the Supreme Point. Under the effect of psychic energy, Chen Ming's body appeared in the command room of the Supreme Point in an instant. The scanning data of the sensor had all been sent to the control console of the spacecraft. Chen Ming sat in the main seat of the command room and called up the approximate data of the galaxy that had been detected at a considerable distance before and opened it together with the data just obtained. From the data he had just detected, this galaxy itself was a very normal galaxy. 1 star plus 5 planets, no satellites. However, the state of the planets in the galaxy was somewhat special, and each of these planets was frozen. No matter how far they were from the star, as long as they were planets in the galaxy, Chen Ming could only see ice and snow on each planet and could not see the original appearance of the planet at all. Obviously, that star was a yellow dwarf star of the same type as the Sun, and its estimated age might be younger than the Sun. But just as Chen Ming had discovered from long-distance observations before, the light of this star is very dim, and it can't provide enough light and heat for the planets in the galaxy. Chen Ming doesn't know the reason, but he knows that a normal star will never have such an inexplicable decrease in energy intensity. Combined with the fact that Chen Ming's wormhole is approaching this galaxy, it is hard not to wonder if there is any connection between them. Is this galaxy also a very special galaxy? Is it also a spectacle galaxy? With this idea in mind, Chen Ming's apex did not stay at the edge of the galaxy for too long. Instead, it dispersed and began to detect every planet in the galaxy, including the stars. He released the detector and approached the star, and at the same time used psychic energy to bring several different exploration ships, each of which went to different planets in the galaxy. Chen Ming gave most of the planets to Yu Hui to control the spacecraft for detection, and it drove the apex to the second planet in this galaxy. This planet is the most special of the 5 planets in the galaxy. It has an atmosphere, although it is extremely thin due to the cold climate, but it does have one. And it happens to be in the habitable zone of a star with normal energy intensity calculated by Chen Ming. So no matter what, Chen Ming must go and see this planet in person. The spacecraft entered the thin atmosphere. The next moment, the blizzard directly submerged the highest point. The fierce wind made Chen Ming, who was inside the spacecraft, seem to hear its whistling sound. The high-precision scanning function of the sensor was also limited. There is an atmosphere outside the atmosphere that limits high-precision scanning, and there is a blizzard inside the atmosphere that affects the accuracy of high-precision scanning. Chen Ming had to find a way to land first, get close to the ground, and then proceed normally. Fortunately, the crystallization of human technology still has its role. The blizzard that swept across the entire planet did not have as much impact on the spacecraft as Chen Ming had initially thought. And although the blizzard engulfed the high point's reconnaissance system and ordinary sensor devices did not have any problems. Even the climate analysis device installed on the high point sensor found that the climate on this planet, except for the extreme temperature and strong winds caused by the blizzard, all other indicators were extremely suitable for human survival. After confirming that there was no problem with the sensor, Chen Ming was a little confused for a while. He didn't know whether this was a good thing or a bad thing. But whether it was a good thing or a bad thing, Chen Ming had to take a look after landing. Soon, as the height of the high point decreased, Chen Ming found that the problem he had to face was not the blizzard on the planet, but the problem of landing at the high point. When the spacecraft landed, the buffer engine nozzle at the bottom of the spacecraft would melt the snow on the surface of the planet. If it was only a few meters or tens of meters of snow, it would be fine. The high point would just sway a little to melt all the snow under the spacecraft and land. But the average depth of snow on this planet is at least hundreds of meters, and after a rough scan at the highest point, Chen Ming also found that the terrain under the snow was obviously uneven, and there was no place to land. And the unevenness of the terrain was not due to the rugged terrain or the influence of solid ice. It was because there was an ice-covered jungle under the snow in the area where the highest point landed. A jungle with countless trees hundreds of meters high. From the roots to the crowns of the trees, the snow continued to accumulate for dozens of meters, forming the most superficial snow that Chen Ming saw now. When the shallow snow melted, Chen Ming could barely see the crowns of the giant trees that were still standing in the blizzard. And the crowns of these hundreds of meters tall giant trees themselves blocked Chen Ming's spacecraft from landing. This distance was enough for Chen Ming to do something. He immediately increased the output power of the sensor, trying to figure out the scale of this giant forest and then find a suitable landing location. But the results of the spacecraft scan did not tell him the right place. All the areas within his field of vision were covered by these giant trees. However, the results of the spacecraft scan also told him another thing. That is, underground, deep underground in this jungle, there is a vibrant world hidden under the ice and snow. This is a world filled with green, blue, and purple at first glance. The green and purple are vegetation, and the blue are luminous plants and luminous fungi that are spread throughout the underground world, making the underground, which should have been extremely dark, as bright as the surface. The environment of this underground world is similar to any habitable planet that Chen Ming has seen. It can be seen with the naked eye that there are lush plants and a wide variety of animals everywhere, full of lush vitality. And the climate of the underground environment is very mild. The freezing of the surface does not seem to affect the underground at all. In Chen Ming's investigation, the source of heat in this underground world seems to come from geothermal energy deeper underground. Even if the surface is cold, the underground is still warm under the protection of the thick earth and the giant trees that support this underground world. The underground world is an isolated paradise. Chen Ming knew an underground ecosystem before, but that ecosystem is very different from what Chen Ming sees now. That ecosystem was born according to the natural geographical conditions of the planet. It is an ecosystem located deep underground and exists in the underground hollow area of almost the entire planet. The main color of that ecosystem is darkness, and there are countless ferocious predators in the darkness. Every creature in that ecosystem, whether it is a plant or an animal, has a weapon to resist more powerful creatures. Because creatures without resistance cannot survive in such an environment. The weapon in the hand of a psychic who Chen Ming had killed before was made of the bones of a psychic individual in a predator called night owl in this ecosystem. Although Chen Ming had eliminated that weapon a long time ago, He always remembered the things about Night Owl and that unique ecosystem. Chen Ming thought for a while and did not continue to try to land the highest point. Because in the scan from the highest point, almost all the land on the entire planet was covered by those giant trees. Only the now frozen ocean was possible to land. So Chen Ming simply did not land. He put on the biological armor that had been optimized for the first time using the power armor of the Shining Civilization and jumped down from the sky, looking at the blizzard outside. For a moment, Chen Ming seemed to feel that the planet below him was crying. Before Chen Ming had time to confirm his feeling, he fell into the hundreds of meters deep snow. Chen Ming quickly found a giant tree buried in the snow and dug along the trunk all the way to the depths of the snow and the depths of the underground. The passage he dug behind him was soon covered by snow, and the temperature sensor of his armor was also telling him that the temperature outside was rising rapidly. The Earth and giant trees on this planet have extremely strong thermal insulation properties. With only a few dozen meters of separation, the temperature difference between the surface and the underground has reached hundreds of degrees Celsius. Chen Ming recorded various data from his field investigations, and at the same time, he was constantly analyzing the soil of this planet and the samples of the giant trees he had just obtained. It can be said that the composition of the soil of this planet is not significantly different from that of any habitable planet, but it does seem to be very suitable for organisms to survive. Among those giant trees, Chen Ming found traces of a unique structure of strong natural chlorophyll. This shows one thing. That is, these giant trees once survived by photosynthesis, and the world was not like this before. Chen Ming continued to move underground. He continued to dig for dozens of meters. He followed the roots of the giant trees and finally arrived at the underground world. Looking around, he only saw luxuriance and vitality. Even through the protective suit, he could feel the vitality of this underground world and a feeling that made people indulge in this world. After the armor system confirmed that the external environment was an environment where humans could survive, Chen Ming tentatively removed the armor he was wearing. An unprecedented sense of comfort, as if he should have been born here, grown up here, and lived here, completely surrounded Chen Ming. Chen Ming's expression suddenly froze. Because Chen Ming had never experienced this feeling before, he was not sure whether it would be a precursor to some kind of attack. But he soon relaxed, because he felt that his consciousness was becoming clearer and his fatigue was gradually disappearing. He just stood here, as if lying on a comfortable hot bed. The whole world seemed to be changing to make him more comfortable and allow him to stay on this planet longer. This was not some unknown psychic power or some other means interfering with his perception, giving him such an illusion. This was what really happened. Because the detector Chen Ming carried with him was reporting that the oxygen and carbon dioxide content of the underground environment and various invisible values closely related to the environment were undergoing obvious changes, becoming more adapted to his body and more adapted to his consciousness. The world was adapting to him. This planet is alive. If Chen Ming guessed correctly, this planet should also be a cosmic wonder. It is a planet shrouded by the consciousness of the real Mother Earth, and it is a real Gaia planet. Chen Ming's feeling when he just arrived at the planet was real. The planet was crying. It sensed his arrival and placed some hope on him. Of course, gods and spirits do not exist. Chen Ming just had such a feeling. In his understanding, this planet should have a certain consciousness, and this consciousness will protect everything on the planet. Just like Chen Ming believes that the phase space itself has consciousness and will create species such as phase behemoths to protect itself. Anyway, in this universe, abstract concepts such as dimensions can give birth to consciousness, and artificial dead objects such as spacecraft can give birth to ship spirits. It is normal for a vibrant planet to give birth to consciousness. It is also normal for a self-conscious being to try to save itself. At this point, Chen Ming finally confirmed one thing completely. That is, the ecological environment in front of him definitely did not exist underground and under the glacier from the beginning. It is more like after the environment in the galaxy has undergone a dramatic change, countless creatures, under the guidance of the planetary consciousness, follow the underground roots of the giant trees to find a way out in the underground where the geothermal heat keeps the temperature. because he noticed that the creatures underground have certain characteristics of adapting to the cold environment, but they have not evolved completely. Instead, it seems that they have evolved for a period of time and then stopped evolving. This can explain what Chen Ming saw. The giant trees on the surface would never grow without sufficient stellar light. The climate on the surface was absolutely no different from that underground in the earliest times. It was not until the stars began to cool that the creatures on the surface were forced to evolve to adapt to the environment. After evolving for a period of time, new vitality began to appear underground, so all the creatures still struggling on the surface hit underground. They started their lives again underground. So why did the light of the stars become dim? Chen Ming didn't know, but he didn't mind helping the planet regain everything in the past. He really wanted to see what would happen after the planet was restored to its original state. And it just so happened that he knew a technology. Climate modification technology. Perhaps this technology can be used on this planet to make up for the disadvantage that the stars in this galaxy are too dim. Or perhaps he can start with the stars in this galaxy. Chen Ming was just thinking about whether to start investigating the sudden climate change in the galaxy from the stars. The detector he sent out to approach the star just now suddenly sent back a message. On the dim star in the galaxy, there is a very bright light spot moving rapidly. Chen Ming's first reaction was that it was a stellar flare. And from the photos sent back by the detector, it was indeed an irregularly shaped bright spot, accompanied by a large amount of stellar matter, and it seemed to be just a flare. But in Chen Ming's cognition, only stars with normal or frequent activities will have flare activities. How could a star with a sudden drop in temperature, which has caused the original habitable planet in the galaxy to transform into an icy planet, still have such a bright flare? Chen Ming placed the sensor image sent back by the detection device flying to the sun in front of him and carefully observed the situation of the flare. He could see the general shape of the flare, which was no different from an ordinary flare. That is, a large amount of stellar matter was thrown out, forming a flare that could be directly observed. However, this flare was abnormally bright, so Chen Ming's current observation methods could not directly see the details of the flare. And just when Chen Ming was about to send the detection device at the highest point directly to the vicinity of the star for a new round of high-precision detection, the flare that was still on the surface of the star suddenly turned around and re-entered the star. All the ejected stellar matter fell under the star and could no longer be observed. Although this was a bit coincidental, the erupted flare, that is, the stellar matter ejected by the star, could indeed fall back into the star. And as Chen Ming sent the detector to the vicinity of the star, scanning the star did not find any subsequent abnormalities. Although it is said that due to the nature of the star itself, it is unlikely that any reconnaissance equipment can directly penetrate into the extreme depths of the star, but if we only look at the outer layer of the star, there is really nothing to doubt. This seems to be just an ordinary flare. Although Chen Ming's doubts are still lingering in his heart, he can only choose to leave more detection equipment to monitor this dim star. As long as there are new changes in the future, he will be able to receive the news as soon as possible. Chen Ming spent a little mental energy to install a large number of detection devices around the star. At the same time, the exploration ships he sent to other planets for reconnaissance have also obtained preliminary reconnaissance results. The conditions of those planets are similar to those of the Gaia planet that Chen Ming personally inspected. Except for the outermost planet in the galaxy that is farthest from the star, the other planets were not originally frozen planets like today. They are all affected by the lowering of the temperature of the star, which eventually formed the frozen appearance they are now. Even Chen Ming's exploration ship found traces of life under the ice layer of a planet. However, it is just a trace. That planet is not like the real Gaia planet where Chen Ming is now, and it does not have such a strong ecological self-regulation ability. After the planet was frozen, there is no living life on it now, and there is only death on it. But even so, this planet is still a planet worth researching and developing. The same is true for other planets in the galaxy. Although it is not as rich in resources as the planets in the origin galaxy, whether it is the planet now covered with snow and ice, or the former planet under the ice and snow, it is a very good planet. Even if there are no other frozen planets in the galaxy, The Gaia planet alone has attracted Chen Ming to develop this galaxy. Chen Ming now has the origin galaxy as a colony before the wormhole. Then, of course, there is also a place like this after the wormhole. This is something Chen Ming had thought of before. It was just when he entered the wormhole and arrived at the world after the wormhole. He happened to encounter a black hole next to the wormhole, and there was a nightmare of the plane in the black hole. The existence of a black hole is not enough. The black hole itself has a certain deterrent power. The exit at the other end of the wormhole, near the black hole, will also increase the importance of the origin galaxy in disguise. The colony built by Chen Ming in the world behind the wormhole can only be a little farther away from the black hole. But what he never expected was that the wormhole ran away directly after he solved the nightmare of the plane. Originally, Chen Ming didn't know whether this was a good thing or a bad thing. But after reaching this galaxy faster than the wormhole and confirming the situation of the galaxy, Chen Ming felt that this was a good thing. He could try to build a colony behind the wormhole here, although the two colonies are actually separated by a universe in physical distance. But they are actually equivalent to being in the same galaxy. This special situation brings additional benefits to both galaxies. But Chi-Man is still unclear about one thing. That is, since the wormhole is still moving, there is a possibility that the wormhole will continue to move after arriving at this galaxy. If the wormhole runs away again, it will be very troublesome. Of course, Chen Ming is not without a way, but it will take a little more effort. But Chen Ming looked at the self-conscious Gaia planet where he was at this time. When he was on Gaia, the whole planet was changing itself for his presence, just to make the planet's environment more suitable for his feeling. He really had to find a way to protect Gaia and make it part of his colony. This planet and galaxy deserved it. Chen Ming didn't know much about climate modification technology, so he needed to find time to ask about it. It would take some time to apply this technology. However, he had survived for several years to build a colony, so this was not a big deal. Moreover, the consciousness of Gaia would definitely try its best to cooperate with Chen Ming to improve the planet's climate, and the effect of climate modification would definitely be shorter than expected. And to be honest, this matter itself would not take up too much of Chen Ming's time. All he had to do was record the detailed data inside the galaxy, and then send the data to a department in the Empire called the Pan-Habitable Planet Ecological Environment Department. By the way, prepare some funds to support this department in climate transformation. The rest is just waiting. Anyway, the process is not important. Someone will help Chen Ming prepare everything. It's just that some people may need Chen Ming's help to take them to the now frozen Gaia planet to carry out the actual process of climate transformation. That's also a small matter that can be done easily in the future. Chen Ming did it as he thought of it. All the data obtained by several exploration ships and star exploration devices were recorded and saved by him. All the analysis data of the necessary climate conditions were recorded according to the requirements on the official website of the Ministry of Environment and sent directly. The Ministry of Environment has a subordinate climate transformation department that has always been quite idle, and it is normal to accept external climate transformation tasks. After all, there is no shortage of habitable planets in the Empire, so the demand market for climate transformation technology itself is not large. The only planets that really need climate modification are those that exist in galaxies with development value, whose climate conditions are not suitable for human survival, but have the need to land. There are not too many such planets, and there are no tasks to do. Whether it is a task assigned by the Empire, a new colony built by a large company, or some wealthy individuals, at most 1 or 2 people come to the climate modification department throughout the year. So this department is basically supported by the Empire's annual allocation of funds, and is specifically responsible for researching climate modification technology and nothing else. As a result, Chen Ming heard that they seemed to have been bored and started to study automated climate modification technology. Relying on specially modified equipment or organisms, after being deployed, they can adapt to the ecological environment to improve the planet's climate. It is said that their goal is to strive to transform all the planets in the Empire that can be climate modified into habitable planets at a very low cost. They also named this project the Seed of Life Plan. At present, there is no word yet, and it sounds extremely unreliable. But Chen Ming still decided to trust this department. Of course, Chen Ming did not refer to the seed of life, but climate modification. Although he had heard that climate modification was very difficult, and there seemed to be not many successful cases in the entire empire. But after he carefully studied the technology of the empire, he found that there were fewer failed cases than successful cases. Or it could be said that there were really not many cases in total. Chen Ming himself did not use his authority, and he found a total of about 200 cases of environmental modification. At first glance, it seemed quite a lot, but looking at the empire, 200 cases were really nothing. Among them, there were more than 170 successful cases, 3 failed cases, and the remaining 20 to 30 cases were all terminated and not continued. There was really nothing to say about such a project with a success rate of nearly 90%. And he had no other choice. The empire had only one official department that was engaged in environmental modification. Who else could he find? The environmental department responded very promptly. After confirming the planetary data and requirements sent by Chen Ming, he called Chen Ming directly. As soon as Chen Ming picked up the phone, the other party said directly, "Mr. Chen Ming, we have received your request. There are a few questions that need to be confirmed with you. The intensity of stellar radiation is at least 1/3 lower than that of stars of the same type. There is no specific data to explain the reason. Do you have any additional information here?" It seems that the other party should be a researcher or something. Chen Ming responded, "When I got there, the galaxy was already like this. I can only send you the integrated data based on the situation on the planet. I am not sure about the rest." Chen Ming really didn't know the reason for the sudden change in the environment in the galaxy. At most, he roughly inferred that the construction time of this underground ecosystem was about 3 years ago based on the snow accumulation and underground ecological conditions on the planet, and the time when the stellar light weakened was about 5 years ago. Nothing else is known. The only thing that is worthy of suspicion is the sudden flare that was just discovered. However, he sent the record of observing the flare. Since the people in the climate modification department didn't mention it, it probably wouldn't be an important situation. Although the stellar intensity is very weak, it doesn't mean that flares are completely impossible. Maybe it's just an occasional phenomenon. I see. Next question. The planet you want to transform the climate already has a stable underground ecosystem. Transforming the climate may cause the underground ecosystem to collapse or have unpredictable consequences. This consequence is likely to be negative. We must inform you of this. At that time, we will also conduct an on-site inspection to determine the situation of the underground ecosystem and determine whether the planet is suitable for climate transformation. Chen Ming seemed to hear a little arrogance from the professional on the phone. It seems that he does not trust the results of Chen Ming's investigation. Chen Ming also understands. After all, he found out from his own investigation that the underground ecosystem only lasted for a few years at most, and the fusion of the entire planet's ecology only took a few years. It was hard to believe this. What else can he say? He could only say casually, "It doesn't matter, the underground ecosystem is stable and will not be affected." People from the Ministry of Climate Change seem to want to say something and correct Chen Ming's remarks. After all, in his view, climate change is inherently dangerous and will have an almost irreversible major impact on the planet's climate. No matter what the climate was like on the original planet, the subsequent climate will undergo extremely significant changes, and it is normal to cause a devastating blow to the original ecosystem. Therefore, almost all the planets they have carried out climate modification are planets that did not originally have ecosystems. No matter what the outcome is, there will be no impact. And if it is a planet with its own ecosystem, whether you succeed or fail, the results can be disastrous. But they really need customers now. So even if there seemed to be something wrong with the data sent by Chen Ming, they did not correct it directly in front of the customer, but used a more indirect way to confirm it themselves. When Chen Ming said something that was beyond their knowledge, they didn't express any reaction. Anyway, they have to sign the contract in the end, and if there is any problem, they can't be blamed. The researcher affiliated with the Ministry of Environment on the other end of the phone endured what he thought was a question and said, "Last question. What do you mean when you say that the planet has extremely strong ecological adjustment capabilities?" "Literally, I have told you that you don't need to care about the original ecology. As long as you can find a way to restore the surface ecology, then do it. The researcher really couldn't hold it any longer. Ecological adjustment ability is an objective phenomenon determined based on the actual situation of the ecological environment. It does not mean that the planet can adjust its own ecological environment. He really wanted to say this, but in order to prevent customers from running away, he didn't say anything. Anyway, he has seen many things where laymen guide experts, and this one is no different. Chen Ming could probably guess what the people at the Ministry of Environment were thinking, but he was too lazy to argue. Facts would prove him right in the future. Wait a moment. The researcher from the Department of Climate Change suddenly sounded a little strange. He asked, "Is your name Chen Ming?" "Yes, what's the matter?" "Is it that Chen Ming?" Chen Ming was silent for a moment and did not respond. But he heard some chaotic noises on the other end of the phone, as if there were several people busy nearby. At this time, the office of the Climate Change Department under the Empire's Ministry of Ecology and Environment. The research institute that was on the phone with Chen Ming just now muted the communication and looked at the computer of the colleague next to him. It displays some publicly available information about Chen Ming. Although it wasn't much, but combined with some of the rumors they occasionally heard, they found that it seemed that today was a big customer that they couldn't afford to offend, and this big customer seemed to be more capable than them in some aspects. They can't understand it not because the person is wrong, but because they are too naive. The researcher just now was almost crying when he spoke and asked extremely anxiously, "What should I do?" "Call the boss, he might have an idea." After a while, the researcher just now suddenly changed to a new enthusiastic attitude, no longer the businesslike attitude just now, and said to Chen Ming, "It's really you." "So, I'm very sorry, Mr. Chen Ming. I want to ask you again, are what you just said related to psychic energy?" Chen Ming did not pursue him and said matter-of-factly, "I'm not sure. First of all, I really don't know the status of the stars in that galaxy. Then I'm not sure if the planet itself is related to psychic energy, but I am sure that the planet is special. It has self-awareness and can actively adjust the situation of the planet." The institute took a deep breath and said, "I'm sorry, Mr. Chen Ming. The problems just now are all due to my lack of knowledge. They are all my own problems. We can help you with this climate transformation for free. Please understand." "It's okay, I don't care." Having said that, Chen Ming would not really pursue anything until he was full. The institute breathed a sigh of relief, thinking about what their boss had just said, and tentatively asked Chen Ming, "Can you please allow us to go to the planet you mentioned for a period of inspection first? The galaxy you mentioned is rather special. It may take us some time to verify whether climate modification can be carried out. I'm very sorry. We really can't give you an accurate answer before we have contacted that planet." "All right." Chen Ming didn't hear any problem in these words and agreed to their request. "Let the Climate Change Department prepare the necessary manpower and facilities, and he will send all the people to their destinations when the time comes. Arrangements have been made for climate modification." Chen Ming immediately moved on to the next thing seamlessly. That is to find the survivor to continue the previous communication. At the end of the last exchange, the survivors took the initiative to initiate a transaction request, but Chen Ming delayed it on the grounds that their empire needed to discuss it. It's time to reply to them with a result. Chen Ming continued to stay underground on the Gaia planet. It can only be said that this planet felt so comfortable that he didn't want to leave at all. He took out the communicator and said to the survivors, "We have already discussed the results here, and we can trade with you." The survivors responded at the same speed as last time, but they did not directly mention the Empire's agreement to trade. Instead, they asked, "Is the person communicating with us still the same as before?" "It's me." "Okay, there is no change on our side. It's still me. You can call me Nano." This Nano refers to the noun Nano in the Shining Civilization. If it is used as a name, Chen Ming should transliterate this word. But transliteration is too troublesome. In order to save some brains, Chen Ming directly used the meaning of the noun translated from the Shining Civilization as a nickname for the survivor's person who claimed to have certain social skills. After Nano gave his self-proclaimed name, Chen Ming also responded with his own name, Chen Ming. After solving the problem of addressing, Chen Ming went straight to the point and said, "Regarding the way we trade, the Empire has already made a preliminary plan, you can listen to it. If you have no objection, follow this. If you have any objection, you can raise it and we can discuss it again. Chen Ming gave a more friendly attitude than last time, and the survivors certainly could not refuse Chen Ming's request to listen. The specific form of transaction is also a form that other people in the empire came up with. In short, the initial transactions with the survivors are mainly technical transactions. Both parties specify a technical direction for each other. For example, physics, sociology, and engineering. Then list 100 technologies, select a certain number from them, and exchange them. Of course, the specific scope is definitely not that large, but it must be refined to more levels. For example, the more cutting-edge aspects of physics include computing technology, force field technology, particle technology, and other different aspects. Choosing more refined technical aspects is helpful for trading the required technology. Just talking about trading technology, it is indeed the empire that makes more money, because the technology of the shining civilization is indeed stronger than that of the empire. So the survivors may not necessarily agree, and the empire has also prepared a second plan. However, the reply from the survivors saved Chen Ming a lot of trouble. No problem. This should be regarded as their way of showing sincerity again. When the number of transactions increases, the subsequent transactions will gradually become equal and will involve more and more directions. From technology to culture and society, this is an inevitable and foreseeable development. As for whether such transactions will continue in the future, it depends on the specific situation. In the first transaction, both parties had a special choice of technical direction. The empire chose the psychic theory of the shining civilization, while the survivors chose the empire's statecraft and sociological technology. Chen Ming felt something was wrong when he heard the technology the survivors wanted. When he sent the technical direction of the transaction to the Minister of Civilization and Culture, which was expanded from the original Ministry of Culture after the empire confirmed the existence of the survivors, the gloomy atmosphere and attitude over there seemed to explain the seriousness of the problem. It is not like a friendly civilization to directly ask for the national policy of another civilization. Although there are excuses to explain, such as the shining civilization is very curious about this aspect of the empire because of its different political inclinations from the empire. But between civilizations, all things cannot be thought of in a good direction. However, the face is not torn now. Although the statecraft is important, it does not mean that there will be problems if it is announced. Before the real face-to-face relationship breaks through the bottom line, the empire and the shining civilization will continue to trade like this. The transaction with the survivors ends here. But Chen Ming's time is still not done. Not only the previous things, even after Chen Ming talked with the people from the Ministry of Civilization and Culture, he had one more thing to do. The director of the Psychic Power Institute still remembered Chen Ming's needs. In just a few hours, he helped him find a group of researchers to be selected and sent the list to him for review. Chen Ming decisively accepted the file. Before his wormhole reaches the information about the location of Gaia planet, he should finish the work quickly. There may be a lot of things to do when the wormhole arrives. The list of personnel given by the director of the Psychic Power Institute seems to have been found by mobilizing connections, and there are people from all over the world. But when Chen Ming saw the list at first glance, he only saw a name that made him a little unhappy. The 5th Legion. Chen Ming carefully looked at the resume of this person from the 5th Corps. He was originally a researcher trained by the 5th Corps. He left the 5th Corps after the chaos in the Kamo Star domain last time. He himself had no connection with Zhujiang, but because he had a close friend who had a close relationship with Zhujiang, he was not brainwashed like other people, but a very senior believer of Zhujiang. Therefore, he was forced to retire. From this resume, it seems that this person is indeed fine. It was just because he was too deeply involved with Zhujiang that the 5th Corps had no choice but to force him to retire and then arranged a civilian job for him. As long as he did this job, he could continue to keep in touch with the Corps, which was also a bit of the 5th Corps background. But for this researcher, such a gap seemed a bit difficult to accept. So he did not go to the company arranged by the 5th Corps for him, but chose to build a new small laboratory by himself and take over other projects. It seems that he still wants to go back to work in a place with status. However, he certainly can't go back to the 5th Corps. So in the end, There was one more person in the talent pool of the director of the psychic power. Overall, there was no problem, but the title of the fifth core made Chen Ming frown. He had conflicts with the fifth core before. Although there was no direct conflict, the relationship was definitely not very good. Even though Chen Ming's current ability was enough to threaten the empire, the other side still had no attitude. Chen Ming was too lazy to run across most of the empire to investigate these issues, but he was still a little unhappy that the people of the fifth core showed up in front of him. Although it was not a bad thing to pry the fifth core's people, this researcher was still specially cared for by the fifth core after being forced to retire because of his deep involvement in Zhuijing's affairs, which showed that he was at least a capable person. After knowing that he could not return to the fifth core, he still chose to work independently temporarily, which also showed that he would definitely not be bound by the fifth core, and it would definitely be no problem for him to join other research institutes with military or government backgrounds. The director of the Psychic Institute definitely thought so he added this person to the list. But Chen Ming really didn't like the fifth core. After all, the things that happened before were still vivid in his mind, whether it was the earliest thing or the last thing. Although the impact was quickly suppressed, Chen Ming still remembered what they had done. This eventually led to him not trusting anyone in the Fifth Legion. Chen Ming would not doubt a person without reason under normal circumstances. But the project he was recruiting for was about the study of the nightmare of the plane, which was very important and dangerous. Chen Ming thought about it and simply called out the list of all people again, raised the review standards, and reviewed it again from the beginning. Confirm what should be confirmed, and review what should be reviewed. It is a skill to pass, and it is not necessary to say if you can't pass. After that, Chen Ming had to give travel expenses to all those who passed to ensure that everyone could reach the new galaxy he rented. Enter the project team, where he arranged the research direction in advance and arranged the team leader. But he only trusted them a little bit at the beginning. Most of the project team members had to open their own or join a project team after they were familiar with the limbs of the nightmare of the plane. The laboratory would provide them with resources and environment, so the final benefits of their achievements would be shared by the project team members and the laboratory to which the project team belonged. This is also one of the manifestations of the development of Chen Ming's extraordinary laboratory. A mature laboratory must have a similar structure to ensure the long-term operation of the laboratory. He will only keep an eye on a few key projects, including the psychic shield. After all, these technologies are what Chen Ming can really use. After reviewing the list of personnel sent by the director of the Psychic Institute, the people from the Climate Transformation Department also gave Chen Ming a prepared reply. Chen Ming prepared a little and drove a new Supreme Point prepared for them to the space station where they were stationed. The Supreme Point had just entered the port. Chen Ming saw a crowd of people in the port and various equipment that almost filled the port unloading area. With doubts, he opened the cargo hold of the spacecraft and walked off the spacecraft in person. A researcher who looked only in his 30s came up immediately. Chen Ming had read the website of the Climate Transformation Department in advance. He was the director of the department. The director came up and extended his hand to Chen Ming enthusiastically. "Mr. Chen Ming." Chen Ming extended his hand and shook his hand and asked, "I saw it on your website. It seems that you have only about 300 people in total." "Yes, all are here." "It doesn't matter. Anyway, we don't have many tasks this year. It's our honor to help you do things. I'm glad you feel okay. Get on the ship. This time we may go a little far." The director waved behind him, indicating that he could start arranging robots to move the equipment on board. In the midst of the busyness, Chen Ming heard some scattered conversations in the crowd, which seemed to be talking about the Seed of Life project. Chen Ming silently thought about the Seed of Life project and the purpose of this trip and didn't say much. He just took the director to the captain's room and handed over the control of the spacecraft to him. Then Chen Ming used the old method to teleport the spaceship directly to the origin galaxy, and then used the wormhole to reach the world on the other side. Although Chen Ming can use his own psychic energy to teleport between the Empire and the world behind the wormhole, the distance beyond the observable universe makes the consumption of doing so even exceed the upper limit of his ability. Anyway, the effect of passing through the wormhole is similar to direct teleportation, and there is not much difference. At most, when passing through the wormhole, Chen Ming has to explain to the minister why the wormhole that the spaceship just drilled out is flying with the spaceship. When the highest point carrying the climate transformation department arrived in the galaxy where the Gaia planet is located through the jump, everyone entered the state directly and began to debug the equipment that had been prepared on the way here, and they could start the pre-climate transformation investigation at any time. The minister in the captain's room gradually became serious after entering the galaxy. Mr. Chen Ming, this galaxy gives me a strange feeling. Chen Ming looked like the minister was talking nonsense, and there was no need to elaborate on his thoughts on the galaxy situation. I know that, but I don't have the right means to investigate now. No, no, no. I'm not talking about the strange stars now, but other aspects. From the data you obtained before and the data we are observing now, the changes in the state of stars in the galaxy are very drastic. They only happen in a short time and then end. Such drastic changes in stars cannot leave no traces. Apart from anything else, where did the energy of the stars that suddenly decreased go? Flare. It is definitely related to that flare. The minister said a little embarrassedly. When you just gave us the task, we did not look at your data carefully, but we checked it carefully later. There is definitely a problem with that flare, but we are not sure what the problem is. A more detailed investigation is needed. Among the equipment we brought this time, there is equipment for observing stars. As long as the flare phenomenon appears again, we will definitely be able to figure out what it is. The impact of stars must be taken into account when modifying the climate of a planet. Chen Ming is not surprised that they have these equipment. It can only be said that things that should be left to professionals should be left to professionals. Chen Ming nodded to the minister and talked about another thing that might affect the investigation of the galaxy. Oh, by the way, do you remember the wormhole we just came out of? It will be here in about half a day. Ah. In the minister's days and Chen Ming's explanation, the highest point quickly approached the planet Gaia. It began to descend from the orbit of the planet to the surface. Every certain distance, the people from the climate transformation department would release a detector fixed at a certain height. There are detectors left at different heights from outside the atmosphere to the surface, just to obtain the most detailed planetary data. And at the same time, it can be regarded as a comparison with the data detected by Chen Ming last time. Although the Minister of the Climate Transformation Department has already believed that the data given by Chen Ming is fine, the procedures that should be followed must be followed, which is a respect for the work. And judging from the various data fed back by these deployed devices, the environmental conditions of the planet are really good. As long as the influence of the blizzard can be eliminated, this planet will be a planet extremely suitable for human habitation. However, the minister still couldn't see the specific manifestation of the conscious existence of the planet that Chen Ming mentioned. Chen Ming didn't directly answer his question, but just asked him to record the data first, and he would know later. The spacecraft lowered its altitude all the way to the snow layer of the planet. The data on the surface and in the air have been recorded. Only the data underground needs to be recorded. Chen Ming had already said that due to the existence of the giant forest. Therefore, the underground operation needs to deploy external working equipment, pass through hundreds of meters of snow, and continue to dig underground. Considering the efficiency of this mission, the existence of Chen Ming, and the wormhole that will be reached in less than half a day, the minister chose a more efficient but also more dangerous way. Go directly to the spider-type all-terrain reconnaissance vehicle, and he personally led a group of people to form an underground environment reconnaissance team to go underground. The spider-type all-terrain reconnaissance vehicle can be said to be synonymous with flexibility and stability. It is enough to complete the task of collecting planetary data. The rest of the people continued to monitor the equipment that had just been deployed on the spacecraft, and also continued to install new monitoring equipment at different locations on the planet. Ensure that the data will not produce errors. Another group of people entered the highest point and took other spacecraft to the vicinity of the star to install a special device for detecting the status of the star, which was more professional than some general-purpose detection devices that Chen Ming could get. The spider-shaped all-terrain detection vehicle quickly went deep into the snow and went to the underground world along the trunk and roots of the giant tree, like Chen Ming before. The minister personally took the stage at this time, and Chen Ming certainly would not be idle. However, after the group entered the underground world, he did not stay on it, but opened the hatch and jumped out directly. Mr. Chen Ming, don't worry about me, just record the data. Chen Ming waved to them and walked to a farther place. When he came here before, he stayed here until the climate modification department needed him to go pick him up. In addition to being comfortable here, he was also trying to communicate with the consciousness of the planet. Although the effect was not ideal, the planetary consciousness seemed very weak, which led to him not being able to find someone to communicate with. But he had to try. What if he could communicate? If he could communicate, the rest would be easy. On the spider car, a researcher on the equipment console suddenly called the director. The minister turned his head and found that his expression was very surprised, so he asked, "What's wrong?" "The environmental index is changing rapidly." "How did it change?" "It has become more suitable for the human body." "Ah, yes, really. This underground ecosystem can already allow people to survive here, but it continues to make people more comfortable." Chen Ming's voice just happened to come from the intercom channel. "Did you see it? This is what I call the consciousness of the planet's existence. I prefer to call such a planet Gaia." Gaia. The minister of the Climate Transformation Department still knows the well-known mythological figures, especially the mythological figures closely related to the Earth. Of course, he also knows that mythological stories are just for listening. In fact, this situation is still closer to psychic or similar existence. Although the minister is not a psychic, he also knows that these things that exceed the limits of normal people have existed for a long time and have a way that ordinary people can understand. So he asked, the concept of planetary consciousness is still too general. Since it can adjust the environment, there must be a means of adjustment, right? Indeed, Chen Ming said. It should be those luminous plants, which produce most of the light and the living things in the environment underground. The luminous plants may be controlled by the planetary consciousness. But these plants don't seem to be able to connect to the planetary consciousness in reverse, so I'm also trying. The samples of luminous plants were collected and tested when they just passed by. Indeed, these luminous plants in the underground world maintain the stability of the entire ecosystem. It is because of their existence that this planet has the name of Gaia in Chen Ming's mouth. And these things are of special value to their department. But the minister thinks it's not time yet. He continued to talk about the problem of the planet itself. "Mr. Chen Ming, do you know when the star will undergo a dramatic change? I remember that I sent you data as well. According to the situation on the planet Gaia, it happened about 5 years ago." The minister certainly knew that Chen Ming had written it in the document he sent them. He asked this question just to lead to his next sentence. "I have an idea. Since we already know when it happened, why don't we jump to a place 5 light years away from here to conduct optical observations here?" The words of the Minister of Climate Transformation made Chen Ming stunned for a while. He really hadn't considered the method the minister mentioned to determine what happened a few years ago, but it sounded like it was indeed okay. Isn't this how superluminal technology should be used? Before, because the wormhole was less than 5 light years away from this galaxy, Chen Ming could only see the stars that had cooled down, and his mind didn't turn around for a while. But in the universe 5 light years away, everything was still the same as it was 5 years ago, and he could see what the stars looked like before. Although the accuracy of optical observation at such a distance is definitely not as good as close-range sensor scanning, it is definitely enough for the scale of stars. After accepting the minister's advice, Chen Ming continued to let the Climate Transformation Department record planetary data on Gaia to prepare for subsequent climate transformation. He himself left the planet, boarded his own high point, and jumped to a position about 5 light years away from the galaxy where Gaia was located. Since Chen Ming didn't know much about climate and other knowledge, he could only roughly know that the drastic changes on Gaia occurred about 5 years ago. Therefore, the distance he jumped must not be so accurate. There is no way to jump accurately to the time when the star undergoes major changes. But this does not affect anything. He only needs to point the ship's sensor to the galaxy of the Gaia planet, and then jump multiple times in a straight line to adjust the precise distance. Soon, about 5.3 light years away from the Gaia galaxy, something happened on the star that Chen Ming observed with the optical sensor. At the location where the light 5.3 years ago is now propagating. Chen Ming saw a huge flare with a tail moving straight from outside the galaxy to the star in the galaxy. After processing the photos taken, the full picture of the flare appeared in front of him. It was not a flare. It was a giant creature with an appearance similar to that of a bacteriophage, a virus that devours bacteria. It has a head that is as regular as a bacteriophage, a long and thick trunk that is different from the proportion structure of a bacteriophage, and 6 thick tails separated from the end of the trunk to support itself. The flare approached the star at a rapid speed. The seemingly heavy beast did not sink directly into the star, but stood on the surface of the star easily, only piercing its 6 tails into the star. It was used to maintain the balance of its thick body and huge head. At the bottom of its trunk, a cone-shaped organ like a mosquito mouthpart gradually extended out, or it was probably some kind of organizational structure of the organ, and pierced downward into the star. Then a large amount of stellar matter was sucked out of the star itself by a suction force and entered the body of the monster. The light on its body became brighter, and on every edge of its head there was a substance that seemed to flow with the vitality of the star. Even its size seemed to increase a bit. The temperature of this area on the surface of the star dropped almost visibly. And this bacteriophage, or star eater, was obviously not satisfied and continued to change its position on the surface of the star, devouring the stellar matter. It became brighter and brighter, while the star itself became dimmer and dimmer. By comparing the volume of the flare with that of the planet and the star, it can be roughly calculated that this flare is about half the size of the nightmare of the plane. And the flare that Chen Ming saw on the star before was at least as big as 2 nightmares of the plane. Either the flare that Chen Ming saw was a real flare, and it was not the same thing as this monster that should be called Star Devourer. Or in the past 5 years, the Star Devourer has grown to its current size by devouring the energy of the star. The answer is self-evident. Chen Ming let the highest point speed up slightly and move forward. This can speed up the observation of the Star Devourer, the star, and the inside of the galaxy. Not long after, the Star Devourer almost completely extracted all the high-energy matter on the surface of the star, and the originally bright star that could provide vitality for the planets in the habitable zone no longer existed. As the temperature of the star dropped, the original blue Gaia planet full of vitality was completely frozen in just a few months. The blizzard became the climate that could be seen when the planet's surface moved. The planet consciousness did not give up, but forcibly maintained the underground ecosystem until today. After watching the whole process, Chen Ming couldn't help but sigh and said, "Another one." If you really want to count, he has encountered 3 giant beasts of this size. A scavenger robot, a plane nightmare, and a star-eating body that he has observed now to devour stars. There is nothing to say. The plane nightmare has become a half-plane nightmare because it hindered his development. This star-eating body hindered his actions to restore Gaia planet, and it is bound to follow the footsteps of the plane nightmare. Chen Ming has to find a way to lure out the star-eating body that has now infiltrated the star and kill it. Even if Gaia planet is not necessarily restored to its original state after getting rid of it, at least its environment will not continue to deteriorate, and the weakening of the star will no longer continue to expand the impact on the planets inside the galaxy. Chen Ming has already thought of a way to lure out the Star Devourer. That is to use stellar matter. Star Devourers devour stars, so they must be well aware of the changes in stars. If stellar matter disappears on a star for unknown reasons, as long as the Star Devourer has simple intelligence, it will definitely come to find out the reason. Chen Ming just happens to know how to transfer stellar matter inside a star, and it was taught to him by the mechanical race in the past. The mechanical race once used the reverse matter jump device to transfer stellar matter from the star to their planet in an attempt to kill him. Chen Ming lost an arm directly to the stellar matter at that time, but he also successfully controlled the device in his hands and mastered its manufacturing method. It just happens to be used now. Although this reverse matter jump device has some shortcomings. For example, when jumping matter, it can only jump to a tiny place, and it can only jump to dead objects, and the energy consumption is also extremely huge. For example, the mechanical race didn't know how long it took to set it up before, and the device equipped with the antimatter engine probably sent less than half a cubic meter of stellar matter. The effect can only be said to be average. But Chen Ming is different. He also mastered antimatter technology, and he also has an energy supply that seems to be almost unlimited at present. As long as the device is activated for a long enough time, a large amount of stellar matter can always be extracted to a degree that is enough for the monster to discover. In addition, Chen Ming actually has another way to attract the appearance of the star-eating body. That is to wait first. At this moment, there is a wormhole that has just left the black hole and is running here. Chen Ming wants to see if the star-eating body in the star will move after the wormhole arrives. It would be best if it came out because of the wormhole, but if it doesn't come out, Chen Ming really needs to prepare a device to transfer stellar matter. Chen Ming also considered the survivors. They may also know the news of this monster that devours stars. After all, the black hole where the wormhole was located at the beginning is not even 5 light years away from this galaxy. Even if the star-eating body just arrived in this galaxy 5 years ago, Chen Ming also believes that the survivors who have been paying attention to the wormhole and the black hole next to the wormhole will definitely notice this star-eating body in the nearby galaxy. But Chen Ming did not go to find them. If there is a way, he thinks he should try not to get involved with the survivors. In his opinion, the purpose of the survivors is obvious, that is, to revive the shining civilization. They also know that the Empire absolutely does not want to trade with them, and only wants to take away all the relics of the shining civilization in the hands of the survivors at once, whether they are technology or physical objects. It's just that the Empire and the survivors have their own needs at present, so they maintain a hypocritical peace. Once they find an opportunity, both sides will try their best to send each other on their way. So Chen Ming will not get too involved with them. His butt is always sitting on the human chair. If he really needs it, the worst thing is to send the survivors away in the future and take it from their corpses. Chen Ming did not continue to prepare more plans. The current plans are enough. He immediately began to arrange a plan for the star-eating body in the star. Half a day passed quickly. Chen Ming appeared on the highest point that he handed over to the Climate Transformation Department. In order to avoid the unknown dangers for the researchers who were responsible for climate modification, he contacted the minister in advance and asked people to call all the people who were out back to the spacecraft. At least after the wormhole arrived, before his first operation was over, the researchers should stay in a safe place. The past half-day was enough for them to obtain data for analyzing the situation of Gaia. The minister and Chen Ming stayed in the captain's room waiting. He was an ordinary person, but he wanted to see it, so he told Chen Ming specifically. Chen Ming didn't mind being more friendly to people who cooperated with him, so he stayed here and chatted with the minister. Anyway, he had already made full preparations. Not only the facilities for extracting stellar matter, but also the fleet for dealing with the star-eating body. The star-eating body is twice the size of the nightmare of the plane, and the fleet to deal with it naturally needs to be expanded. It's just a matter of Chen Ming's words, and the Queen of Worms will prepare what needs to be prepared. The same means of attack should not be ineffective. Let him see what is special about this star devourer compared to the nightmare of the plains. The image of the sensor suddenly changed, and the wormhole had entered the observable range of the sensor. Although he had seen this strange celestial body before, the minister next to Chen Ming was still shocked to see a wormhole running around with his own eyes. He wanted to say something, but after noticing Chen Ming's serious expression, he chose to remain silent. After approaching the Gaia galaxy, the wormhole began to slow down, gradually entering the interior of the galaxy and entering an orbit around a star. The orbit it entered just corresponds to the orbit of the real Gaia planet around the star, and it just happens to be on the other side opposite to the Gaia planet. It is exactly the same as the other end of the wormhole. The orbit of the wormhole at the other end is opposite to an ordinary habitable sphere, which is called Gaia by Chen Ming. And the orbit at this end is opposite to a real Gaia planet. The wormhole just entered the orbit, like a celestial body that has been here all the time, without any further movement or signs of leaving again. Chen Ming breathed a sigh of relief. At least it seems that he does not need to continue tracking the wormhole or find a way to lock the wormhole in place in the short term. But he cannot relax now, His goal is the Star Devourer. However, even if the wormhole just entered the galaxy and entered the orbit just like the Star Devourer entered the galaxy, from the data returned by the sensor equipment that Chen Ming arranged near the star to cover the star in all aspects, there is no sign of any flare on the surface of the star, nor any trace of the Star Devourer. The star is still very stable, with a stable low temperature, and the arrival of the wormhole does not seem to stimulate it. It seems that Chen Ming still has to use the means he prepared personally. However, just before Chen Ming really took action, the communicator on his body suddenly rang. It was the survivor who took the initiative to initiate the communication. Chen Ming picked up the communicator and saw only one sentence on it. "We want to ask one thing. Have you seen the Star Devourer?" Chen Ming frowned and chose to respond with silence. Sure enough, the survivors themselves explained why they knew about this matter. "We are keeping an eye on many things, especially the wormhole leading to our original world. So, we can provide you with some information about the Star Devourer, such as its weaknesses." Before the survivors continued to talk about their trading conditions, Chen Ming directly refused. No need. Chen Ming's plan was halfway prepared, and he couldn't follow the rhythm of the survivors. And last time he fought with the nightmare of the plane, he didn't take out his trump card, and this time with the Star Devourer, it was even more impossible. This time the communication ended at the speed of light. In the extremely dark space station of the survivors, the arm that flashed with two metallic colors of light and rust put down the communicator that had just been closed. Another voice came from the darkness. "Your performance last time and this time was too much," which made Chen Ming more vigilant. The survivor with the code name Nano responded, "It is this vigilance that will make humans think in the wrong direction. There are still many guardians wandering in different locations in this star field. Sooner or later, he will need us." The survivor space station fell into silence again. At this time, Chen Ming couldn't help but frown, holding the communicator and staring at the two sentences on it, thinking constantly. He refused the deal with the survivors for other reasons besides that he did have means prepared but had not used them yet. Because he felt trouble and danger from the survivors. It was not the danger of danger perception, but a simple sense of danger. Why could they contact him just when he was about to do something? How did they see what was happening here? What means were they using to monitor this galaxy? Or in other words, monitor him? Optical sensing cannot be that fast. It takes 5 years to detect what happened 5 light years away. The survivors could only know that he had encountered the Star Devourer if some kind of monitoring system was installed somewhere nearby. But Chen Ming couldn't find the monitoring equipment, nor did he feel like he was being spied on. His intuition could help him perceive many situations that were sometimes impossible to observe with the naked eye, such as people watching him from behind, who would be easily discovered by his perception. But he had no perception of the survivors' monitoring methods. Just like Chen Ming couldn't track the signals sent out by the communicator before, or he wasn't strong enough. Otherwise, there would be no need to consider this problem at all. But anyway, no matter what happened in the outside world, no matter what the impact was, he had to do what he had to do. Chen Ming's psychic energy fluctuations swept across the entire galaxy, and after not finding any problems, he activated the reverse matter transition device. He began to transition the stellar matter out of the star. Compared to what the phagocytoma swallowed, what Chen Ming took out at this time could only be regarded as a drizzle. Moreover, Chen Ming had only activated the device for a few seconds, and only a little bit of stellar matter was transitioned out. The dim surface of the star in the galaxy showed signs of intense activity. It was unknown whether Chen Ming had drawn some important materials with more energy or the energy of the Star Devourer. In short, the Star Devourer was indeed anxious. As the violent activity on the surface of the star became more and more obvious, a dazzling light spot appeared on the sensor. After a slight modification of the sensor data, the appearance of the Star Devourer appeared in front of Chen Ming. It stretched out half of its body and a tentacle-like tail from the inside of the star, and the tip of its tail pointed to the area in space where star matter was escaping. A ray that seemed to eject star matter penetrated Chen Ming's device for extracting star matter in space and directly destroyed it. The next moment, the Star Devourer, having achieved its goal, wanted to turn around and return to the star. But Chen Ming's fleet, which had been prepared long ago, jumped to the vicinity of the star at the moment the ray was emitted. Even though the heat of the star is extremely terrifying, the armor of the biological fleet has the ability to isolate plasma. The star itself is a huge plasma. As long as it does not directly enter the interior of the star, the temperature outside the star alone cannot threaten the Zerg fleet. The Zerg fleet is still the same as before, consisting of pure Hercules class, numbering 200. It's not too much, because the first wave of attacks is still just a test. Since the last time Chen Ming launched an attack on the Nightmare of the Plane, and the Nightmare of the Plane released some kind of super-wide attack, Chen Ming had already made up his mind. Anytime he fights against this type of enemy, he must test it out first to avoid unnecessary losses. Although the loss was meaningless to Chen Ming still chose to maintain this habit. And just like last time, the Zerg fleet prepared a large number of different types of weapons to test the damage caused by the astral phagocytosis itself to different types of weapons. When Star Eater had just finished his raise and turned around to return to the star, the Zerg fleet's various weapons attacks fell on the body and tail that had not completely sunk into the star. The tail was broken directly, and the icosahedron on the head was directly penetrated, leaving countless wounds on the body. A large amount of stellar material is ejected from the wound of the astral phagocytosis, spilling into space and towards the star. The results of all weapon tests were immediately returned to Chen Ming. It can be seen that neither live ammunition weapons nor energy weapons perform very well when facing this kind of creature that can live in stars. Live ammunition weapons will be melted by the terrifying high temperature, and energy weapons will also be offset by the high energy of the star. But the effect of arc weapons is still powerful. This kind of direct damage derived from the concept of radiation has a good effect when facing any enemy. Whether it was the penetrated head or the broken tail, they were all the results of arc weapons. At this time, the injured astrophage did not hide directly in the star, but climbed out of the star. The light on its body is flashing at an extremely high frequency, as if it is roaring angrily with this strong light. The wounds on its icosahedral head recovered quickly, and the broken tail also grew back at a speed visible to the naked eye, and all the tail tips were aimed at Chen Ming's Zerg fleet at the same moment. Chen Ming's eyes just glanced at the weapon's actual combat data and the angry astral eater. His attention was drawn to the condition of the star itself, because he suddenly discovered that some of the attacks by the Zerg fleet just now did not fall directly on the astral phagocytos, but on the stars. This is a normal situation, but what is abnormal is that the attack methods that fall into the star seem to have penetrated a barrier. The energy inside the star was dissipated through the penetrated barrier. Chen Ming could see that the material inside the star still maintained high energy. Although it is definitely weaker than before, compared to the almost cold star surface, the energy inside the star is still barely enough to maintain a normal cosmic environment. Chen Ming understood. Astrophages don't actually drain stars of energy. It does draw away a lot of star energy, but it also secretes or produces some kind of substance, covering the surface of the star. These materials restrict the star's energy from escaping outward and concentrate the energy inside, where the astral phagocytosis can be used for its own use. It's like a Dyson sphere. This was once a purely theoretical idea of a means of collecting all the energy of a star. Part of it is now being realized by such a giant beast deep in the starry sky. There was no time for Chen Ming to think too much, because at this time, the Astral Eater's counterattack had already arrived in front of the Zerg fleet.
Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, please like, share, and subscribe.